Humid here with temperatures in the mid-20s, elsewhere again high teens or low 20s.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're kick-starting summer with your chance to win our biggest cash prize to date, as there's an incredible £54,321 in tax-free cash to be won. What would you spend it on? A brand new car, the holiday of a lifetime, or just sit back, relax and remove some of those day-to-day financial stresses? For another chance to win, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Back in 2015, Thornton and Cleveley's resident Emma Shepherd noticed the grass in her garden wasn't growing. Within months, she had to put down Alfie, one of her beloved dogs, who had developed throat cancer. Just weeks later, she developed a lesion on her back, which would later be diagnosed as skin cancer. She knew then that something wasn't right.
I wasn't really aware of the history of the ICI site when I took the property. I did so much investigation. I had the ground tested with my own money. There was high levels of metals in there and some obviously cancerous carcinogenics in there. They actually nicknamed me Erin Brockovich because I was so all over it.
Last year, a joint investigation was launched by the Environment Agency and the local council. That was following the discovery of PFOA, a man-made chemical that potentially causes cancer. Both parties told GB News they are now working together on this matter, whilst the company under investigation for the potential release of the substance had this to say. AGC Chemicals Europe sets the highest standards for itself and takes its commitments to the local community and to the environment extremely seriously. They added that they voluntarily phased out the use of PFOA in the UK by early 2012. Release of the substance was within the permits held by AGC Chemicals Europe at the time and also UK legislation in place at the time. And yet, 2 months ago, residents within a kilometre of the site received this letter from the council, advising them not to consume anything grown in their gardens due to potential PFOA contamination.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Very good afternoon to you. I'm in the zone today. It's 3 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Norbury Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. Hundreds of protesters have taken to the streets of London today as we speak to show support for Palestine Action, despite them being prescribed as a terrorist organisation. The protest has until 3 p.m. now for a strict curfew to come into place. Will the cops be making arrests, as they have done on Patriot marches? I myself was arrested for contravening a Section 35 dispersal order. That's in place now. Let's see if the cops get stuck in. We'll be live from the front line.
For the British public, that we're doing everything we can to stabilise the situation, to de-escalate the situation, and to get to a negotiated outcome.
Yeah, Keir Starmer called for a de-escalation in Iran, but nobody was listening because both Donald Trump and Israel both then bombed Iran without even telling our Prime Minister. Keir Starmer paints himself as an international statesman, but is he becoming increasingly irrelevant on the world stage? And Nigel Farage today unveiled a Robin Hood tax that takes £250,000 from minted foreigners to give £600 cash bonuses to the poorest British workers. Is this robbing from the rich to give to the poor simply socialism in disguise? Or does it have the makings of a great British idea?
They say, why do we bother? Because the people next door do nothing, and they're pretty much as well off as we are.
And meanwhile, woke Bournemouth Council have been blasted as woke and broke after it cancelled the town's much-loved air show. Town Hall bigwigs claim they cannot afford the £250,000 it takes to run it, although it rakes in 16 million quid for the local Bournemouth economy. I'll be joined by a furious local armed forces veteran who says they've simply lost the plot. Well, the show, it's a pleasure to have your company. What is the definition of a hate march? I'll tell you what a hate march is. A march that supports a prescribed terrorist organisation. Precisely what's going on right now, about 200 metres from where I'm sat in Whitehall, down at Trafalgar Square. 3 p.m, 2 minutes ago, a dispersal order came into place, a Section 35 order. I've seen them in action on Whitehall when arrests were made of patriots. They were scooped up, thrown to the floor, handcuffed, taken out of there, sharpish. They could literally, their feet could barely touch the ground. Will that be happening as we speak? Bear in mind, the people that attended the Patriot organisation weren't supporting any prescribed terrorist organisation. They were supporting themselves, supporting the flag, supporting the nation. What's going to be happening in Whitehall? We're going to be down there to take a little look. Do we have two-tier policing, or will this lot once again get the soft arm of the law? Get in touch, gbnews.com/you'll say. It's the way to do it. But now it's time for your headlines, and here's Katie Bowen.
Martin, thank you. The top stories at 3:03. The Israeli Defence Forces have said more missiles have been launched from Iran towards Israel. Approximately 15 Iranian missiles were launched in the latest wave of attacks. That's as President Trump has hailed bullseye strikes on Iran. NATO chief Mark Rutte said a short time ago that those strikes did not violate international law. President Trump has now floated the possibility of leadership change in Iran hours after his team said replacing the regime was not the aim of the US strikes over the weekend. He added that those attacks caused monumental damage to Iran's nuclear sites, while Iran has vowed a decisive response. Israel's military says it's launched a new attack on access routes to Iran's Fordo nuclear site. Keir Starmer's warned that there's a risk of the Middle East crisis spiralling beyond the region. The American president has now called for oil prices to be kept down amid fears that ongoing fighting in the Middle East could cause them to spike. Shadow Defence Secretary James Cartledge spoke to GBNews earlier on.
Just not clear what he actually thinks of the attacks. If you look at the language, he's talking about, recognising the action has happened, that he's spoken to the president. Does he actually support the actual military action? Because let's be clear, lots of people say, lots of politicians in this country, lots of our allies, quite rightly, and it's important that they do. They recognise that Iran can't be allowed to have a military nuclear programme, but at the same time, it's not clear what the action is that they would take to deal with that.
While the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, says Tehran must not be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon and should get back to negotiations.
I've believed for a long time that Iran should never be able to develop a nuclear weapon, and that's why the US took the action that it took at the weekend. The Prime Minister spoke to President Donald Trump on the phone last night to discuss next steps, and we all agree, the US, the UK and our allies, that Iran now needs to get back to the negotiating table and that we want to see a de-escalation, because an escalation of the conflict in the Middle East is in no one's interests.
Elsewhere, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says she's decided to prescribe Palestine Action and will lay an order before Parliament next week, which, if passed, will make membership and support for the protest group illegal. That's as the Metropolitan Police Chief, Sir Mark Rowley, has expressed his shock and frustration at a protest being held today in support of Palestine Action. At least 2 people have been arrested at the protest as we know it. On Friday, Palestine Action activists broke into RAF Brize Norton in Oxfordshire and sprayed 2 military planes with red paint in protest of the UK's support of Israel over the war in Gaza, which the Chancellor has called totally unacceptable. Plans to lower energy costs for thousands of businesses by exempting them from some green levies have been set out as part of the government's new 10-year industrial strategy. The plan may slash energy bills by up to 25% for more than 7,000 UK businesses. Prime Minister Keir Starmer called the industrial strategy a turning point for Britain's economy by supporting key industries where there is potential for growth. Acting Shadow Energy Secretary Andrew Bowie criticised the plans, saying the UK needed a serious approach to energy policy. A man has been charged with the murder of a woman found fatally stabbed after a gas explosion at her home in North London. 44-year-old Clifton George was also charged with arson with intent to endanger life after 36-year-old Annabelle Rook was found fatally injured in Stoke Newington just before 5 a.m. last Tuesday. Mr George, who was found with slash injuries, is due to appear at Thames Magistrate Court today. A West Yorkshire police officer who had been reported missing has been found dead, the force has confirmed. Charlie Mitchell, a 26-year-old patrol officer from Halifax, was reported missing from his home in Leeds on Saturday. West Yorkshire Police said officers searching St Aidan's Nature Reserve near Leeds found his body at around 5:30 yesterday afternoon. The death is not being treated as suspicious. And the mass rollout of weight loss jabs on the NHS in England will begin today, as GPs are allowed to prescribe the drugs for the first time. Around 222,000 people with greatest need are expected to receive Mounjaro through the NHS over the next 3 years. It's an anti-diabetic drug which lowers blood sugar levels and slows down how quickly food is digested. From today, GPs in England will be allowed to prescribe Mounjaro to severely obese people who also suffer from a range of other health problems. The medicine makes you feel fuller, so you eat less. In clinical trials, people taking it lost 20% of their body weight. Those are your latest GB News headlines. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Done. My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.3394 and €1.1676. The price of gold is £2,515.82 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 8,765 points.
Done. My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Well, Joe, now before we head back to that aggro at Trafalgar Square, let's cross to the House of Parliament. As just a few moments ago, Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelenskyy arrived at Parliament.
His Majesty, and we are thankful for support to government, to the United Kingdom and to your people for the big support from the very beginning of this war. And I hope today to discuss all the important issues, urgent things which we I think, yes, which are very important for us.
I'm still absolutely overwhelmed of what happened to the people in Butcher. I will never forget that day when I met you there, along with other speakers of Europe and your representative, Lord Speaker, and the families and the emotion. Nobody could ever imagine the horrors of how people are treated, tortured, murdered.
Of course, that is Volodymyr Zelenskyy there speaking with the Speaker of the House, Lindsay Hoyle, ahead of what is probably going to be another fundraising tour. I mean, Zelenskyy is in Parliament. Back to our top story today. Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, has now confirmed that Palestine Action will be prescribed as a terror group, but has delayed doing so for an entire week. And that allowed a protest to take place today. And the Metropolitan Police Chief Sir Mark Rowley has expressed his shock and frustration at that protest held in support of Palestine Action, which he has described as an organised extremist criminal group. Well, let's speak now with GB News reporter Adam Cherry, who joins me in the studio. You've just been at the front line there. I think we have some live pictures from that, the end of that protest. Let's just get those pictures up and start speaking to you, Adam Cherry, because the situation now, right, 3 p.m, a Section 35 dispersal order came out. There's a strict cut-off time for this protest. I've seen them in action before on Patriot demos, and the police normally, pretty sharpish, get in there and start nicking people. Now, there are those pictures now, significant police presence, you can see lining up. It's worth noting, Adam Cherry, they're in their short sleeves and soft hats. They're not tooled up for a riot, but they are, as we can see now, look, going in and making arrests. Adam Cherry, tell us why you're not there. You should be reporting from the front line, but you had to move on.
Yeah, so we were there for a good part of 2.5 hours. In the last hour or so, more like the last half an hour, a smaller group were becoming more agitated, and we were spotted and they started to round on us. Not many, maybe 3 or 4. It was happening live as we were reporting on the previous programme, but it was clearly going to get worse and worse. Sort of calling out that GBNews were there, and so it was advised that we should probably get out of there, because you can see some of the footage there already now. Just pretty ugly scenes. But I must say, for the first 2 hours, it was 1 or 2 sort of per hour. Yeah. And then now it's getting more and more agitated. If you're watching it on television, you can see that police presence is greater even than when I was there maybe 20 minutes ago. So more are still arriving because they're supposed to be dispersing, well, as of 10 minutes ago.
Just to talk through, viewers, if you're not familiar with how policing works on protests like this, the police are now forming up in a line, and they will, I assume, what they ordinarily do, they will move forward en masse, and they will start to get these protesters away from the area. Any protesters who resist that, you'd expect to be swiftly arrested. Yeah. I did see a few of those. We've literally just seen one on our screens now. I did see, officially reported, I think, 3, but there's certainly more than that. I mean, like I said, we've just seen one. I don't have the exact figures. It's very hard to say because when it's all a big scrum like that, you can't quite tell how many are being arrested, what's happening. Now, a lot of people, Adam Cherry, will be saying, why on earth was this allowed to go ahead anyway? We live in a free country. Protest is part of the DNA of our country. But this is different. They were prescribed as a terrorist organisation late last week, but it hasn't come into law yet, so they can get away with it. Well,
it was announced or suggested that they would be prescribed, and the Home Secretary in the Commons today said that will happen. I think it requires to be voted on in Parliament, so therefore it takes time to draft up the bill and get it through the Commons. So that is why it is not in effect immediately, instantly. Just to be clear, you were identified as being from GBNews. By the way, this has happened consistently to the channel. It happened to Catherine Forster on the very first protest after October the 7th. I was reporting on Saturday. Catherine was there. She was shoved, as was the cameraman. So the tolerant left identified you. You had to get out of the area because it wouldn't have been safe to remain there. Yeah, I mean, to be clear, I didn't have any physical violence. Catherine, unfortunately, did, but it was. We felt, it was pretty clear that if we stuck around, given that how things were progressing, it was probably unwise. So here I am with you now, Martin, and you can still see there are some there. And this should have been dispersed entirely about 13 minutes ago. It does look like, from what I'm seeing, it's mostly under control there. I mean, obviously, they've got a lot of police officers that arrived in the last few minutes. But about, half an hour to 45 minutes ago, it looked like it was going in another direction. Well, it looked like it was going to kick off. Well, yeah. I mean, perhaps not the worst that these have been, but especially considering, I mean, we were just talking during the break, these things typically get worse during the evening. Yeah. I'd say, given how it was progressing, again, look, it seems to have calmed down a bit, but it felt like it was going in another direction about 45 minutes ago in broad daylight. But it is worth talking about that conversation we have often about two-tier policing. Now, I've been at these protests where it's British patriots, and what normally happens round about now is that around the corner there's a huge long line of riot shields. The police start getting kitted out in their hard helmets, and they start drawing their baton, they form up and they advance towards the crowd, and the mood completely and utterly changes. Now, what we can see from the police here is a much softer sense of policing. They're in their soft hats, those baseball caps they wear, they're in short sleeves, a few high-vis vests, but so far, this is pretty soft policing. We can see the police there, they seem to have apprehended a gentleman wearing the Derringer Palestinian, or it could be a lady, we don't know. They have a full face covering. We often see that at these events. There were a lot of people wearing face coverings, yeah. And to your point, I didn't see any police with riot shields or anything like that. I did see a lot of, like I keep saying, I did see a lot of police arrive within the last hour, but that's because they have to enforce that dispersal order. And it's also worth bearing in mind, as we say, as of today, Palestine Action, although they are going to be a prescribed organisation, they were not at the point at which this protest took place. That was why Mark Rowley, I think, was frustrated yesterday. It was clearly heading in this direction, but legally they can only enforce the law up to the letter of the law. OK, well, we'll cross back to this. As you can see, it's a developing situation. The police have a robust presence, forming up, creating a line, and at some point that line will move towards this crowd, and let's see what happens next. Adam Cherry, thank you for reporting for the front line. Thank you for getting back here. Thank you for making it back safely as well. We'll make sure we go back to that as that story develops. Let's move on now. So is this Keir Starmer's
Middle East nightmare, because Palestine Action isn't just causing headaches for the government here on British soil. The Prime Minister called for a de-escalation in Iran. The trouble is, both Donald Trump and Israel, they both then bombed Iran without even telling our Prime Minister, or at least even until the very, very last minute. So Keir Starmer paints himself as an international statesman, at most comfort on the international stage. But here's today's question. Is he becoming increasingly irrelevant on the world stage? Now, the government has warned that Britain faces increased threat of an Iranian attack here on British soil. Let's speak now to GBNews' home and security editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome to the show. Let's start, if we could, with this. A lot of people are concerned that once again a foreign war could bring trouble to British soil. Is there a concern about increased terror rates here in Britain now?
Yes, there absolutely is. We've seen an uptick in the number of incidents, state-sponsored incidents linked back to Iran in recent months here in the UK, either going after dissidents or a recent plot that was uncovered that he pointed to a potential attack against the Israeli embassy in London. So yes, there's a lot of concern about the potential for that kind of activity in the UK and, of course, abroad. We saw just at the weekend there an arrest of an individual who may be a British national, but living in Cyprus on suspicion of spying on the RAF base at Akrotiri as part of an alleged plot to potentially target that RAF base there. So there is concern. And of course, there's concern among Western countries and particularly the US at the moment as to what the response will be from Iran following the decision by the US to strike those nuclear sites in Iran yesterday. The US, speaking through officials to American media, suggesting the potential for some kind of a response from Iran on US targets within the next 48 hours. Quite what that response might be, Martin, we're not sure as yet. Clearly, Iran has a number of options. It could strike directly at US facilities, of which there are many throughout the Middle East, or it could use its proxies as it's done in the past. But Martin, these proxies, as we know, these terrorist groups that are aligned and funded by Iran have been severely degraded by Israel in recent months. So quite what they would be able to do is an unknown quantity at this stage.
Mark White, can I ask you, please, for your opinion on what we're seeing on the streets right now? Trafalgar Square, Palestine Action, the dispersal order is in place some 20 minutes ago. Not seeing much of a dispersal effort going on. We talk a lot about two-tier policing, don't we, Mark White? I've been at protests from the other side of this equation, as you have. I think we're seeing a very, very different policing today, much softer approach, much more community-based, nothing like you'd see at a Patriots March. Do you think we're seeing two-tier policing today?
I wouldn't go that far, no, because I think these officers, Martin, have been told very directly by their own commissioner in this public statement that he does not want to see this protest going ahead. He's powerless, really, to stop it under any kind of legislation because this group has not been banned and prescribed as yet. That is still quite a few days off. I think the reason, Martin, that we're not seeing those police kitting up with public order equipment such as helmets is, yes, there's been a bit of pushing and shoving amongst the crowds, but what we're not seeing, certainly from what I've seen of the images so far, are kind of objects being thrown, bottles and sticks and bricks and the like, coming over at the officers. If that becomes the case, then very quickly you'll see these officers don their public order kit and there will be a much more robust response. And there has been a fairly robust response in terms of, I'm not saying that the police have pushed forward and wellied in to the protesters, but clearly they're in no mood to accept any kind of agitation and pushing and shoving directly at the officers. They have been pulling the, groups aside or individuals aside and arresting them. But there is a difference, yes, between this and I think the kind of protests that you're alluding to that may have been what they would have branded far-right protests, where perhaps the police have been much more quick to don their public order kit, and maybe they've done that even before the actual protest has got underway as such, which has upped the ante there. But I would say that I think the police have got the sort of word from the Commissioner that they will not tolerate any kind of violence here, which is why they've been going in and already making arrests, Martin.
OK, Mark White, thank you for that nice balanced take. Always a pleasure to have your company. Thank you very, very much. Now let's go live now direct to Israel and speak to the Middle East correspondent and the author, Jotam Confino. Jotam, always a pleasure to have your company. Could I ask you, first of all, before we talk about the situation in Israel, how does it make you feel to know that today there is a protest taking place in London in support of Palestine Action, which is a proscribed terrorist organisation?
Look, I'm not surprised at all. It's a very, very hateful, racist, violent movement that we've seen the past 20 months mobilize in a very, very organized manner, hiding behind slogans such as anti-Israel, anti-Zionist. But really, we know that many of these people are extremely hateful, racist. And I'm not surprised. The West has a huge problem. What Israel has seen in terms of radical Islamist and terrorism is something that Europe has been feeling just a taste of in the past 20 years, and it's only getting worse because these people aren't being dealt with. There's a lot of gaslighting, there's a lot of bad reporting on this. It's clear to most people that these so-called peaceful protests are nothing but just hate. They don't want peace with the Israelis. They want to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. I don't think that's exactly very peaceful.
Jotam, may I ask you what Israelis are thinking of the United Kingdom at the moment? It doesn't seem to many people in Britain that we've been much of an ally to you in your darkest hours. Keir Starmer continually calling for de-escalation, whereas America, of course, has stood shoulder to shoulder. What's Israelis' take now of Britain and of Keir Starmer?
I think a lot of Israelis are, I would say, disappointed with the United Kingdom because, after all, the United Kingdom is a close ally. And especially under David Cameron and Rishi Sunak, there was a close partnership with the UK. But under Keir Starmer, we've seen several, I would say, decision makings from Starmer's government that really doesn't reflect them being an ally. And I would say, especially when it comes to Iran here, you see them wobbling. Instead of supporting Israel in this, they're wobbling. And it's only when the United States enters that they're all of a sudden changing their tune a bit, because God forbid they should be behind Israel when they go after Iran. We just have to remember, Keir Starmer in December, as far as I'm concerned, threatened Iran with sanctions over the very same nuclear program that Israel is now trying to destroy. So Israel and the UK are on the same page with this. So I think a lot of Israelis are quite disappointed with the United Kingdom.
OK, we have to leave it there. Thank you for joining us, as ever, Jotam Confino. Thanks for joining us live from Israel. Now, has Nigel Farage turned into Robin Hood? Found out why next. There he is, Nigel Farage in green tights. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going and where we are with the people who set the direction. That's State of the Nation every Monday and Tuesday at 8 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up? About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our viewers and listeners. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/your say. There, you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/your say, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:28 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, Nigel Farage just said he would reinstate non-dom status for wealthy entrepreneurs if they agree to pay a £250,000 fee, which will be handed to low-income workers. In fact, they could get £600 each. Now, joining now to discuss this is the Labour MP for Bassett Law, Joe White. Joe White, welcome to the show. Robin Hood, of course, from Nottinghamshire. You're there in Bassett Law. Do you like the sound of this take from the rich and give to the poor scheme? You should. Sounds a bit socialist.
Well, it's a very, very interesting concept. It's something that people had to pay into before 2017. So he's bringing something back. In Italy, they run a very, very similar scheme with people paying in about £200,000, and other people living in the household then have to pay in £25,000. But what he wants to do is obviously give £600 to the people who are on low incomes. What it does, and I've been looking at the different sort of tax experts' reports on this, it takes out £34 billion from the Exchequer. Currently, we're using the non-dom money to bring down the waiting lists at hospitals. So in my area, the waiting lists have come down by 2,000 since the government, Labour came into power in July last year. So waiting lists are at the highest they've ever been. They've gone down to the lowest amount since 2008. And what we want to do is have an NHS that functions. People want an NHS where they can get a doctor's appointment, where the doctors actually work so they can see a doctor face to face, so they can get a dentist appointment. And we cannot at the moment be in a place where we're cutting the support to the NHS. Now,
interesting, Joe,
£600 is £600. Yes.
That is a fascinating point, because since Rachel Reeves did her budget, we've lost 7,094 non-doms. They've simply left the country. They've fled the tax dragnet of your government. In fact, we've lost £32.4 billion by 2035, and that's one millionaire every 45 minutes fleeing your Labour government. Surely it's time to do something to entice them back.
Yes, but would it? The fact that each government seems to change the non-dom rules, they got changed in 2017, they got changed in 2023, 2024, doesn't mean that a non-dom will be particularly attracted to come to the UK. If you look, other countries are operating this. I just talked about Italy. promoting different schemes. What I know that Rachel Reeves is currently looking at the rules to encourage non-DOMs to stay in this country. But what we also have to say is, you're going to get £600. What would you rather have? An NHS that functions, that you can guarantee you're going to get your appointment on time rather than have to wait 2 or 3 years if it's a knee replacement, or having £600 to pay? I'd rather see a wealthy country where we invest this money to make it work and function for everybody, so that everybody gets more money in their pockets, and we have an NHS that works.
And Joe, on a fun point, last week Nigel Farage was voted, I don't know who did the voting, but Nigel Farage was voted the sexiest politician in Britain. Do you think it'd be worse or better if he were wearing green tights?
I've not seen his knees yet. Yeah, to see his knees. Make that vote.
I'm sorry, Joe White, for placing that thought in your mind, and indeed for all of the viewers out there. But on a serious point, Robin Hood is very, very well liked in Nottinghamshire, as you know. Do you think this is the gimmick, or do you think actually people might think, this sounds fair?
The gimmick? Because £600 sounds really, really nice, but we've got to have an NHS that works, and that's where the non-DOM money is going right now. Nigel Farage has previously talked about how he'd like to make sure we all pay personally for our healthcare treatment. So that potentially, if he is the next Prime Minister, we'd be spending that £600 on our private health insurance. So it could quickly get spent on other things rather than on the nice things in life. And what I want people to have is better wages and a better lifestyle, because we've got an economy that's working, and that's my focus.
But I do think people would respond. Look, politics is basically about bribery, isn't it? I mean, in one form or another, various groups, let's be honest, various groups get what they want or get what they don't want, and everyone likes to promise free stuff. It might be tuition fees under Jeremy Corbyn's government. It might be different tax breaks for other people. And I reckon if you said to people in Bassett Law, do you want 600 quid from Nigel Farage? A lot of people would probably say yes.
Or if I said to them, would you like to have an NHS that works? So when you go into A&E, you can get immediately seen. Or when you're waiting for your hospital treatment, you don't have to wait 2 or 3 years for knee replacement. I know what they'd say.
Fair enough. And once again, Joe White, it's a pleasure to have your company. And sorry for you can't unsee that vision now of Nigel Farage in green
Thank
tights.
you, Martin. Thank you so much.
I'll see you again soon, Joe. Thanks for your company. It's always a pleasure. Thank you very, very much, Joe White. Now then, I think this idea, does have some merit. I think what's interesting is that these ideas kept getting thrown out there, and it bears a lot of similarities to the gold card that was used by Donald Trump. There's a picture that we did. ChatGPT is a wonderful thing. You can say, make a picture of Nigel Farage dressed as Robin Hood with Parliament behind him, and there it is with that trademark cheeky grin. A lot of people are talking about his policy today. They say it's a huge giveaway, but I put it to you, that's what politics basically is. And I think if you said to people, the richest people that come here, take 250 grand off them, but give them the certainty they won't be chased out of the country. And, Joe White there, you have to repeat. 7,094 non-DOMs have left under Labour Party at a loss of £32.4 billion to the Exchequer by 2035. 1 millionaire leaving Britain every 45 minutes since the Labour Party came to power, and that's increased since Rachel Reeves's budget. And also the wealth exodus means 30 millionaires are leaving every day. Now, if you do something to encourage them back by saying for a one-off fee of £250,000, you won't pay tax on the stuff you earn abroad, you won't pay inheritance tax either. So Britain is a safe and prosperous and welcoming place to those with overseas money. And in return, that money goes directly into the pockets of the working poor, not those on benefits, but the working poor. I put it to you that actually that idea would have a lot of merit. Now, do we have pictures back from the square, Trafalgar Square there? Can we get back to those pictures? If we can get to those, just want to remind viewers that a Section 35 dispersal order came in some 35 minutes ago. But we are crossing now to Downing Street, beg your pardon, where Keir Starmer is meeting with Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelenskyy. OK, so yeah, Volodymyr Zelenskyy is visiting Downing Street to address Keir Starmer. He's also meeting King Charles III. He's meeting with the King, of course. On the agenda is the ongoing situation in Ukraine. Now, the attention of the world is focusing on Iran and Israel, the US war there. Volodymyr Zelenskyy, of course, there is he exiting his limousine, walking into Downing Street. He will shortly be met by the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, walking up now to 10 Downing Street. Keir Starmer expected to come out. There he is, the Prime Minister, greeting Zelenskyy. Of course, they have a man hug. They've got quite a bromance on the go. One of the few world leaders who's, in terms of stature, they're about equal in height. Volodymyr Zelenskyy, of course, wants to make sure that the war in Ukraine is kept front and centre stage. Very difficult to do at the moment with the situation in the Middle East. No doubt we'll be looking for more funding to take back. They're going back inside now to 10 Downing Street. Zelenskyy taking audience with our Prime Minister. Expected later on to meet King Charles at Buckingham Palace. Loads more still to come throughout the rest of the show. But now let's finally get to your latest news headlines. And here's Katie Bowen.
Good afternoon. The top stories this hour. Israel's launched a new attack on access routes to Iran's Fordo nuclear sites today, as President Trump has hailed bullseye strikes on Iran as he calls for a regime change. Here's the US Defense Secretary.
As the chairman of the Joint Chiefs will demonstrate, it was an incredible and overwhelming success.
The Home Secretary says she's prescribed Palestine Action and will lay an order before Parliament next week. At least 2 people have been arrested in Trafalgar Square today. Lowering energy costs for thousands of businesses by scrapping green levies will form part of a central part of the government's new 10-year industrial strategy. The plan's been unveiled today. A man has been charged with the murder of Annabelle Rook, found fatally stabbed after a gas explosion at her home in North London. And the mass rollout of weight loss jabs on the NHS in England will begin today as GPs are allowed to prescribe the drugs for the first time. Those are the latest headlines for now. More news at the top of the hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Afternoon, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. After a fresher feel for many today, we'll see the temperatures rise and the humidity building a little tomorrow. A bit of a messy day tomorrow. Could be quite wet in places, but some areas will see some summer sunshine. Been some good spells of sunshine around today and will be through the evening. Still a few showers in northwest Scotland and the cloud thickening tonight across Northern Ireland, turning damp here, and by morning that rain spreading into southern Scotland, northern England and North Wales. Some heavy rain too likely here, especially over the hills. Quite a warm night, temperatures holding up in the mid-teens for most. A dull, damp start then for northwest England, North Wales, southwest Scotland tomorrow. We should see the rain and drizzle pulling away from Northern Ireland, and it may be a bright start across the far northeast of Scotland, but elsewhere further south we'll see rain and drizzle moving through the central belt. As I said, quite a wet start for northwest England, and still pretty dull and damp for Northern Ireland, North Wales too. Some patchy rain over the Midlands, South Wales, southwest England, but it should be a dry start across the southeast. Probably not seeing much rain at all here. It will move its way eastwards, but staying pretty soggy over the Pennines, the hills of southern Scotland also. But generally getting a bit brighter as we go through the day. And as the cloud breaks over the Midlands, East Wales, East Anglia, it could feel quite warm and humid with some sunshine lifting the temperatures into the mid-20s, 25, perhaps even a degree or so higher. As I said, feeling quite humid, certainly for England and Wales, a little fresher for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but we may well get some afternoon sunshine here. Wednesday is also a bit of a mishmash with some more persistent cloud over the Midlands, parts of South Wales, a little bit of showery rain, but many areas looking dry on Wednesday, certainly a drier day for northwest England and North Wales. Just the threat later on of some thundery showers coming up from the south, so that's something we need to watch as the temperatures rise further, that warmth and humidity with temperatures getting up into the high 20s across parts of the southeast.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. Drivers should proceed with care on the M90 Friarton Bridge, where high winds are currently affecting driving conditions. In Wales, the A44 is closed for resurfacing between Llangorrig and Trodiralt, with diversions in place. In Surrey, a broken down vehicle on the M3 westbound is causing one-lane closure between junctions 3 and 4. Road users might face some delay. And on the trains with South Western Railway, there's disruption on various routes. Additionally, Southern Rail faces cancellations between Chichester and Havant and disruption through Redhill. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Welcome back. Time is 3:42. Let's cross live now to the House of Commons, where the Foreign Secretary David Lammy is speaking on the situation in the Middle East.
End this crisis. We can and we must find a negotiated solution. The window has narrowed, but the risks of further escalation are so great and the costs so considerable for Britain and all in the region that this is the government's priority. We don't yet know precisely how far the US strikes have set back Iran's nuclear program, but there remains the need for a durable diplomatic solution. Strikes cannot destroy the knowledge Iran has acquired over several decades, nor any regime ambition to deploy that knowledge to build a nuclear weapon. That's why we've been working so intensively with the new US administration to reach a new agreement with Iran. Iran and President Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, held 5 rounds of negotiations. Britain joined France and Germany in 7 rounds of engagements with Iran as well. Even after the Israeli strikes, I travelled to Washington and then Geneva last week, meeting in the White House with Secretary Rubio and Witkoff. And then sitting opposite Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi in several hours of talks, pushing for Iran to accept the diplomatic off-ramp. And directly after the US strikes, we've been at the heart of a collective drive with partners to get back to negotiations. My right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, has spoken to President Trump. I have spoken to Marco Rubio and Israeli Foreign Minister Saar. We have both been in touch with European and Middle Eastern partners. And this was why I spoke again to Minister Araghchi yesterday as well. My message for Tehran was clear. Take the off-ramp, dial this thing down, and negotiate with the United States seriously and immediately. The alternative is an even more destructive and far-reaching conflict which could have unpredictable consequences. Mr. Speaker, the situation presents serious risks to British interests in the region. Having moved in additional assets on a precautionary basis, force protection is at its highest levels. Be in no doubt, we are prepared to defend our personnel, our assets, and those of our allies and partners. We are closely monitoring how energy markets are responding to the conflict, and we have been extremely clear with the Iranians. Any action to blockade the Straits of Hormuz would be a monumental act of economic self-harm, making a diplomatic solution even harder. Mr. Speaker, we are also maintaining sharp focus on other conflicts in the region. First and foremost, the catastrophic plight of Gazans and the ongoing ordeal of the hostages and their loved ones, all fearing that this war leaves them forgotten. Today I met Ali Sharabi, held in chains by Iranian-backed terrorists, who was released from Hamas captivity only to discover they had murdered his family. Last week, Israeli Defense Forces recovered the bodies of 2 hostages, as well as that of Shai Levinson, an Israeli and British family killed on October the 7th, which Hamas has been cruelly keeping from their loved ones. and Palestinian civilians, 500,000 facing starvation, over 400 reportedly killed in recent weeks trying to access food, while Gazan hospitals have had to stop services vital for childbirth and emergency surgeries. This is appalling, Mr. Speaker. It's unacceptable and it must finally end. The Israeli government must lift aid restrictions, Hamas must release all the hostages. An immediate ceasefire has never been more urgent. Mr. Speaker, the consequences of the current situation are hard to predict. History can offer us no guide after events unprecedented in the region. The government has sought to react quickly to the twists and turns of recent weeks while maintaining focus on where British interests lie. A lasting end to Iran's nuclear programme, a de-escalation of tensions, and security for our people across the region. We will continue to persevere with diplomacy. I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Secretary of State Dame Priti Patel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2 weeks ago, the IAEA produced a report that was damning on the Iranian regime. Iran was not cooperating, breaching its obligations, and had over 400 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60%, far beyond any level needed for a civilian nuclear program, and enough material to create at least 9 nuclear devices. Their nuclear facilities are buried deep underground to hide their program, and all this from a despotic, authoritarian regime that represses and tortures its own people. It's committed to the annihilation of Israel, the world's only Jewish state, and is responsible for so much of the suffering in the region through its sponsorship of terrorist proxies. It is supporting Putin in its illegal war against Ukraine and is involved in plots and activities to undermine our national security here at home on a daily basis. Mr. Speaker, it is for these reasons and many, many more that the Iranian regime must never be allowed to have nuclear weapons. That is why we stand with those working to stop them. As His Majesty's opposition, the House will know that we will always put the defence and security of our country first. And that's why we will work constructively with the government to secure the protection of British people and our national interests. We will support the government when they're doing the right thing, but also question, challenge and press ministers to go further when we think more needs to be done to safeguard our interests. It is in that spirit of constructive scrutiny, in the national interest, that I put these questions and points to the Foreign Secretary. Firstly, British nationals and dual nationals continue to be stranded in Israel and the Middle East due to airbase closures. Now, I've written to the Foreign Secretary about this matter and note the progress with today's flight, and I do want to thank the Foreign Office for the work they've been doing with many families who I've been in touch with as well, who have been able to get on that flight today. So can the Foreign Secretary tell us how many British nationals may need to be repatriated? What resources are being deployed to support those efforts? Is there enough capacity to match the numbers that is needed to leave? And why does it seem that the US and other European countries were ahead of us in their operational planning to bring back their citizens? The Foreign Secretary has mentioned the US Embassy advice, and now he's given advice to British nationals in Qatar today. Will there be any further notifications for other British nationals in GCC states? Second, on Iran's nuclear programme, the Foreign Secretary on radio this morning could not say how effective the weekend strikes were, and I understand that will take time to get information. But if more strikes are planned to further degrade Iran's nuclear capacities, will the government consider supporting these? The government has not taken a clear position on the actions that the US and Israel have taken, but we have seen reports of the apparent legal advice from the Attorney General cautioning against UK involvement. And while I appreciate that the Foreign Secretary cannot comment on any legal advice, does the government have a position on the lawfulness of these strikes? And does he welcome the ends as well as the means to achieve this? Does he share my cynicism about Iran's attempt to cloak itself in the UN Charter? That's the same UN Charter it has undermined with its brutality for decades. And can the Foreign Secretary confirm if the US will be permitted to take action from Diego Garcia should future strikes on Iran be needed or actions to defend Israel? Or does the government think that there are legal barriers to the US in doing so? Third, the heightened tensions in the region, can the Foreign Secretary give an update on what further steps are being undertaken to safeguard British military assets in the region and our partners from any unwise military action taken by the Iranian regime? And I say this considering the reports that we heard about over the weekend with the arrest of a suspected Iranian spy plot targeting our base in Cyprus. Are we now stepping up efforts to protect bases? Fourth, what steps are being taken across government and with our police, counter-terrorism, security services to reassess the domestic threat levels? The Foreign Secretary cannot go into operational details, so can he give assurance on the robust action and disruptions to any potential Iran-backed plots that are underway? He mentioned, and rightly so, the issue of Gaza and the fact that we absolutely must work together in terms of ensuring that humanitarian aid gets to people desperately in need of aid. Can the Foreign Secretary update us on what steps he's been taking to engage with Israel to get more aid into Gaza? And does he agree that Iran must be weakened to end their ability to sponsor Hamas and other terrorists in the region?
Foreign Secretary.
I'm very grateful, Mr. Speaker.
And that was Dame Priti Patel there responding to the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy. I'm joined by Adam Cherry in the studio. Quite the change of position, Adam Cherry, because, of course, Labour Party were all about de-escalation until there was a huge escalation. First, Israel bombed Iran, and then America, of course, over the weekend. And we found out there from David Lammy, the PM has spoken to Trump. My message to Iran is clear. Take the deal or face even more serious consequences.
They've been all over the place on this, and particularly since Trump left the G7 early, and clearly to return to the Situation Room and oversee that bombing operation. And Keir Starmer seemed to be blindsided by the whole thing. In fact, he was telling reporters that he was fairly certain that Trump wasn't going to take that action. Well, he did. In fact, he left early to do it. And I thought the readout, us journalists get a bit of a briefing sometimes on what the conversations between the world leaders are, so we can prepare ourselves or whatever. And this one was threadbare. It just said they had a conversation, Trump and Starmer had a conversation last night. OK, well, what happened in it? You know, we now hear a little bit more from the Foreign Secretary, but it would be, I think, good for Keir Starmer himself to have more to say on this. I know he's done one or two little clips, but he hasn't addressed the Commons, which is the point that my colleague, the political editor here, Christopher Hope, made today. I think it's a fair point.
I think you're right, and he's been busy taking Volodymyr Zelenskyy inside number 10, of course, one of his favourite foreign leaders. No statements at all about the bombing in Iran thus far. Adam Cherry, excellent as ever. Thank you very, very much. Now, stick with us because still to come, I'm asking, has Keir Starmer become increasingly irrelevant on the world stage? As we discussed there, not a single peep out of the Prime Minister about the bombing in Iran. Next with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News, Britain's News Channel. But first, it's time for your weather.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Afternoon, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. After a fresher feel for many today, we'll see the temperatures rise and the humidity building a little tomorrow. A bit of a messy day tomorrow. Could be quite wet in places, but some areas will see some summer sunshine. Been some good spells of sunshine around today and will be through the evening. Still a few showers in northwest Scotland and the cloud thickening tonight across Northern Ireland, turning damp here, and by morning that rain spreading into southern Scotland, northern England and North Wales. Some heavy rain too likely here, especially over the hills. Quite a warm night, temperatures holding up in the mid-teens for most. A dull, damp start then for northwest England, North Wales, southwest Scotland tomorrow. We should see the rain and drizzle pulling away from Northern Ireland, and it may be a bright start across the far northeast of Scotland, but elsewhere further south we'll see rain and drizzle moving through the central belt. As I said, quite a wet start for northwest England, and still pretty dull and damp for Northern Ireland, North Wales too. Some patchy rain over the Midlands, South Wales, southwest England, but it should be a dry start across the southeast. Probably not seeing much rain at all here. It will move its way eastwards, but staying pretty soggy over the Pennines, the hills of southern Scotland also. But generally getting a bit brighter as we go through the day. And as the cloud breaks over the Midlands, East Wales, East Anglia, it could feel quite warm and humid with some sunshine lifting the temperatures into the mid-20s, 25, perhaps even a degree or so higher. As I said, feeling quite humid, certainly for England and Wales, a little fresher for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but we may well get some afternoon sunshine here. Wednesday is also a bit of a mishmash with some more persistent cloud over the Midlands, parts of South Wales, a little bit of showery rain, but many areas looking dry on Wednesday, certainly a drier day for northwest England and North Wales. Just the threat later on of some thundery showers coming up from the south, so that's something we need to watch as the temperatures rise further, that warmth and humidity with temperatures getting up into the high 20s across parts of the southeast.
A positive outlook through the night will power through to a bright day ahead. Boxed Home Battery Storage, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon, this is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. Road users should exercise caution on the M90 Friarton Bridge due to high winds affecting driving conditions. Major resurfacing work on the A44 between Langerig and Troderalt has closed the road with diversions in place. In Surrey, a broken down vehicle on the M3 westbound between junctions 3 and 4 has closed one lane, causing delays. Expect congestion on the M49 northbound between the M5 and M4, with delays estimated at 30 minutes. And on the trains, South Western Railway faces major disruptions at Wimbledon, and southern services are severely affected between Chichester and Havant. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
£54,321 in totally tax-free cash could make your year the best yet. How would you react if you got that winning call?
Oh my God, I'm going to cry. Oh my God. Thank you.
You weren't expecting to get that call today, were you?
No, I wasn't.
For another chance to win £54,321 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
A very, very good afternoon to you and a happy Monday. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, hundreds of protesters have taken to the streets of London today to show support for Palestine Action, despite them being prescribed as a terrorist organisation. The protest had a strict 3 p.m. curfew an hour ago. Have the cops been making mass arrests? We'll have all the latest.
All the British public that we're doing everything we can to stabilise the situation, to de-escalate the situation, and to get to a negotiated outcome.
Yes, Keir Starmer called for de-escalation in Iran. The trouble is, nobody was listening because both Donald Trump and Israel, they bombed Iran without even telling our Prime Minister, by all accounts. Keir Starmer paints himself as an international statesman, happiest on the world stage, but is he becoming increasingly irrelevant on that same world stage? And earlier today, Nigel Farage unveiled a Robin Hood tax, and that takes £250,000 from minted foreigners to give £600 in hard bonuses in cash to the poorest British workers. Is it socialism in disguise? Or, there you go, is this robbing from the rich to give to the poor? Simply socialism in disguise? Or does it have the makings of a great British idea? And Bournemouth Council has been blasted as woke and broke after it cancelled the town's much-loved air show. Town hall bigwigs claim they can't afford the £250,000 it takes to run it, despite the fact it rakes in £16 million for the local economy. I'll be joined by a furious local armed force veteran who says they've simply lost the plot. Do we have two-tier policing in this country? It's a question we speak about all of the time. Well, around about an hour ago, a dispersal order came into place to get protesters out of the area of Trafalgar Square, a few hundred metres from where we're sat now. They were supporting Palestine Action, who, of course, on Friday, the Prime Minister recommended himself. They were elevated to the status of a proscribed terrorist organisation. That couldn't come into place, though, over the weekend. And so we had the unholy situation of a proscribed terrorist organisation being supported on British streets by hundreds of citizens. 3 p.m, they were told they had to get out of the area or face being arrested. An hour later, has that happened? Or were the police standing off in contrast, in stark contrast to how they policed some of the Patriot demonstrations that I went to myself when I was myself arrested simply for being in the wrong place at the wrong time? Do we have two-tier policing? We'll be live back to the scene shortly. Get in touch usual way, GBNews.com/your say is the way to do it. But now it's your headlines, and here's Katie Bowen.
Martin, thank you. The top stories at 4:03. The RAF has evacuated 63 British nationals from Israel to Cyprus, with more flights to come. Foreign Secretary David Lammy has told the Commons this afternoon. That's as a British national has been injured in Israel during missile attacks by Iran. The government has also issued a warning recommending that UK citizens in Qatar shelter in place until further notice. President Trump has hailed bullseye strikes which caused monumental damage to Iran's nuclear sites over the weekend. Iran has vowed a decisive response. Israel's military says it's launched a new attack on access routes to Iran's Fordo nuclear site. President Trump has now floated the possibility of leadership change in Iran hours after his team said replacing the regime was not the aim of US strikes over the weekend. Sir Keir Starmer's warned there's a risk of the Middle East crisis spiralling beyond the region. The American president has called for oil prices to be kept down amid fears that ongoing fighting in the Middle East could cause them to spike. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign minister met with Vladimir Putin at the Kremlin earlier today. Here's what Foreign Secretary David Lammy said a short while ago.
We don't yet know precisely how far the US strikes have set back Iran's nuclear program, but there remains the need for a durable diplomatic solution. Strikes cannot destroy the knowledge Iran has acquired over several decades, nor any regime ambition to deploy that knowledge to build a nuclear weapon.
Well, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, says Tehran must not be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon and should get back to negotiations.
I believe for a long time that Iran should never be able to develop a nuclear weapon, and that's why the US took the action that it took at the weekend. The Prime Minister spoke to President Donald Trump on the phone last night to discuss next steps, and we all agree, the US, the UK and our allies, that Iran now needs to get back to the negotiating table and that we want to see a de-escalation, because an escalation of the conflict in the Middle East is in no one's interests.
Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says she's decided to prescribe Palestine Action and will lay an order before Parliament next week, which, if passed, will make membership and support for the protest group illegal. That's as the Metropolitan Police Chief, Sir Mark Rowley, has expressed his shock and frustration at a protest being held today in support of Palestine Action. At least 2 people have been arrested at the protest as we know it. On Friday, Palestine Action activists broke into RAF Bryce Norton in Oxfordshire and sprayed 2 military planes with red paint in protest of the UK support of Israel over the war in Gaza, which the Chancellor has called totally unacceptable. Plans to lower energy costs for thousands of businesses by exempting them from some green energy levies have been set out as part of the government's new 10-year industrial strategy. The plan may slash energy bills by up to 25% for more than 7,000 UK businesses. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer called the industrial strategy a turning point for Britain's economy by supporting key industries where there is potential for growth. Acting Shadow Energy Secretary Andrew Bowie criticised the plans, saying the UK needed a serious approach to energy policy. A man has been charged with the murder of a woman found fatally stabbed after a gas explosion at her home in North London. 44-year-old Clifton George was also charged with arson with intent to endanger life after 36-year-old Annabelle Rook was found fatally injured in Stoke Newington just before 5 a.m. last Tuesday. Mr George, who was found with slash injuries, is due to appear at Thames Magistrates Court today. A West Yorkshire police officer who had been reported missing has been found dead, the force has confirmed. Charlie Mitchell, a 26-year-old patrol officer from Halifax, was reported missing from his home in Leeds on Saturday. West Yorkshire police said officers searching St Aidan's Nature Reserve near Leeds found his body at around 5:30 yesterday afternoon. The death is not being treated as suspicious. And the mass rollout of weight loss jabs on the NHS in England will begin today as GPs are allowed to prescribe the drugs for the first time. Around 220,000 people with greatest need are expected to receive Mounjaro through the NHS over the next 3 years. It's an anti-diabetic drug which lowers blood sugar levels and slows down how quickly food is digested. From today, GPs in England will be able to prescribe Mounjaro to severely obese people who also suffer from a range of other health problems. The medicine makes you feel fuller, so you eat less. In clinical trials, people taking it lost 20% of their body weight. Those are your latest GB News headlines. More from me in half an hour.
Thank you, Katie. Now, is this Sir Keir Starmer's Middle East nightmare? Because Yvette Cooper has confirmed plans to ban Palestine Action, beg your pardon, as a terror group, as they cause havoc in central London this afternoon, as police made several arrests. And meanwhile, the whole world seemed to know that America was going to strike Iran, apart from our beleaguered Prime Minister. Has this rendered him completely irrelevant on the world stage? We've seen the implosion of his economic, his welfare, his immigration, his rape gang policies. And now he seems to be failing even in global matters. I'm joined by two guests now, and that's GB News' reporter Adam Cherry, who was at that march earlier on in Trafalgar Square, and also by the political commentator Samuel Sweek. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. I'm going to start with you, if I can, Adam Cherry. Yeah. Palestine Action prescribed terrorist group. Well, they're recommended to be prescribed late on Friday. Nigel Farage said they should be. Keir Starmer then followed into line. Astonishingly, hundreds of people turned up today at Trafalgar Square in support of an organisation who committed an estimated £55 million worth of damage in total, £25 million of damage at RAF Bryce Norton last week. You were there and you had to leave because it got a bit feisty.
Yeah, towards the end it did. There was a smaller group of more, say, agitated protesters. Most were OK, I'd say. You know, I was there for about 2.5 hours, and for 2 hours of it, we were left to report and do our journalism. It was only towards the end, once more arrests were starting to be made, and I think the police were being slightly more confrontational, because we were leading up to the 3 o'clock dispersal order, that they noticed us, noticed me and my cameraman, and started saying GB News, sort of circling us and obviously trying to make a bit of a scene out of it. Nothing violent, but it felt a little bit too much, so we left the scene. Now we understand that it has mostly dispersed, but it still took some time after 3 o'clock for that to happen. Almost 3:30 before I think the last few were moved on their way.
And it's worth bearing in mind that GB News has been facing a lot of harassment on these marches. In fact, Catherine Forster, our colleague, was harassed on the very, very first one of these protests in London, straight after October the 7th. She was shoved, and so was the cameraman. But what was the mood on the ground? Because a lot of people looking on would just find it incredible that people would turn out supporting Palestine Action, which the state has rejected. The Labour Party has said it recommends as a prescribed terrorist organisation.
So what was the mood? Well, like I said, for the first couple of hours, you'd see 1 or 2 arrests every sort of 15, 20 minutes, something like that. There's not a huge number, but enough that was agitating the crowd, and then towards the end it got worse. You saw a lot of, I mean, it's sort of the familiar notes that we've been seeing for a couple of years with these protests. So free Palestine chants, from the river to the sea, some staying on the ground, squatting on the ground. The road was entirely blocked, so traffic couldn't pass by. And then also some banners saying, "We are all Palestine Action," chants a similar effect. So it was familiar territory. It wasn't the worst one of these sort of protests that I've seen, like I said in the last hour, but it felt like it was going that way for a while towards the end. Then more police arrived, a lot more police arrived, not using riot gear or anything like that, but then, like Mike White said in the last hour, I didn't really see any objects being thrown or anything like that. You know, the Met themselves were frustrated with this protest, didn't want it to take place, but didn't have the power at the time to implement any more dispersal effects than they already had in place.
OK, well, let's get the alternative opinion now of my guest, Samuel Sweek, political commentator. You've been very supportive of Palestine since the beginning of this conflict, but is there not a clear difference? Palestine Action, you know, are thugs, they're vandals, they cause millions of pounds worth of damage to jets, jets that could have been flying the royal family, even the Prime Minister himself. A line was crossed clearly. And you know, why are these people taking to the streets to support them today?
Well, I think why people are taking to the streets is, and the birth, essentially, of Palestine Action is our government's failure to deal what is very, very clearly egregious breaches of international law that are taking place in Gaza, perpetuated by the Israeli government, who our British government tacitly supports through surveillance, through intelligence sharing and through diplomatic cover. The planes, in particular the ones at RAF Bryce Norton, are ones that are used for refuelling for surveillance flights from RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus.
But it doesn't give you the right to damage them. They may need to be scrapped or completely rebuilt at the cost of £25 million to the taxpayer. I put it to you, they should be made to pay or go to jail.
Well, I mean, what I would counter that is the British taxpayers' money is being used to essentially assist Israel's egregious breaches of human rights and international law in Gaza.
But that's a democratic process of the elected government, not mindless thuggery and violence.
I mean, but let's be honest now. Palestine Action have hurt not a single person, and I think it's an abuse for the government to put them...
25 million quid is a lot of damage, it's a lot of abuse, it's a lot of hurt, and that would be paid for by the British taxpayer. Why should you, me, everyone watching the show, have to pay for the damage that these cretins put out?
Look, Palestine Actions, as I said, their direct action they've taken is in response to the British government's failures to actually tackle the international law breaches and the egregious, horrendous things that we have been seeing in Gaza perpetuated by the Israeli government.
Do you think they should be a prescribed terrorist network? Because Keir Starmer does. Yvette Cooper does.
Well, no. I mean, there's no precedent to prescribed Palestine Action. I refer to two cases in particular. The Seeds of Hope case of 1996, where a group of people damaged some aeroplanes at BAE Systems site in Preston because they were concerned about the Indonesian government's illegal occupation and eventual genocide in East Timor. They were found not guilty, and as they were found to have reasonable actions under the 1969 Genocide Act. And
Palestine Action, of course, £55 million worth of damage to property in Britain and counting. And at some point, any reasonable government's got to call time on that.
I mean, before I come to that point, I would say as well that Keir Starmer himself defended my second one on my list here, which is a case called the Fairford Five, which was a very similar case to what Palestine Action have done at RAF Bryce Norton. Keir Starmer himself was on their defence team. Now, I think it's deeply concerning that a man can flip and flop on his principles like that, can defend people from serious jail time, become the leader who is deeply tied to a government who are committing human rights abuses and breaching international law in Gaza, and completely change that, and then put a group of people who have committed at worst criminal damage in the same group as groups like Islamic Jihad, Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram, Wagner Group, far-right cells. It's not the same. No one has been hurt, no one has been killed, and the only time I've actually seen...
Hang on. If they're damaging jets that are refuelling military aid... You know,
it's not military aid.
Military intervention, call it what you want. You know, we have a situation where Hamas committed an atrocity. Israel responded. Hamas started this.
I mean,
let's be real. The Israeli government decided to defend itself. We were dragged in whether we like it or not. And if action is taking place where it needs British help, and that can't be done because of Palestine Action, I put it to you, that is an act of sabotage. It's an act of sabotage that should carry an appropriate response. And the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary agree that response is to call them a prescribed terrorist organisation.
Sabotage, yes. Terrorism, absolutely not. And as I said, it's a complete breach of the laws that are in place. And placing Palestine Action in the same group of people who have killed people in this country and around Europe and around the world is a complete abuse of that. And it's because the government wants to silence any criticism towards it for its tacit support of the Israeli government and what it has done in Gaza over the last 2 years.
OK, I'll leave it there. Samuel Sweet, thank you very much. And Adam Cherry, excellent as ever. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Moving on. A very, very brave Iranian woman who lives in Tehran has a message for GB News viewers, and we've kept her identity secret as she fears for her life after criticising the regime. In fact, she could be arrested and tried, and who knows what could happen to her for treason and spying if her true identity were ever revealed. She sent this message to us at GB News.
Hello. You're hearing my voice from the heart of Iran, from the city of Tehran. Iran is a land of rich civilization and breathtaking beauty. But after the disastrous 1979 revolution, the lives of the Iranian people were plunged into hardship and suffering. For 47 long years, the Islamic Republic has repeatedly crushed protests, tortured, imprisoned, and executed the Iranian people, and it has never stopped. To the people of the West, I say this: if you truly seek a world of peace and justice, if you believe in the freedom of the Iranian people, stand with us. If world powers support the Iranian people, we have only one demand: the complete overthrow of the clerical regime. Our dream is a free Iran. The British people must wake up before they suffer the same fate as we have.
Truly astonishing message. It really sent shivers down my spine listening to that. That is a woman presently living in Tehran, sent that message to us at GB News. She follows us and follows our output. And she says that the people of Iran are truly grateful for what we do at GB News to tell the stories of people from within the Ayatollah's Islamic regime. They want shut of it. They want freedom. They want their country back. Thank you for that message. Deeply, deeply moving. Now for some more analysis. We can now go live to Israel and speak to the former British Army Commander, Colonel Richard Kemp. Colonel Kemp, it's a pleasure to have your esteemed company as ever. You write so lucidly and excellently on this topic, and you have since the very, very beginning. I want to ask you a huge question. Do you think Keir Starmer has rendered himself politically obsolete in the conflict between Iran and Israel?
I think he has. I mean, he's betrayed, not betrayed is too strong a word, he's certainly let down our country by refusing to effectively stand alongside President Trump, who's been trying to rid the world of a huge nuclear threat. And Trump took decisive action yesterday, which makes the world a great deal safer. Britain normally stands alongside the United States in these situations. Prime Minister Starmer has failed to do so. And I think his policies are based not so much on strategic imperatives and the need to protect our country, which Trump is effectively doing for us, but domestic concerns, domestic policies. When you see these groups of thugs on the streets with Khamenei placards in their hands supporting the Ayatollahs in Iran, and we've just heard how horrific they are, I think that's what he's concerned about. He's concerned about the number of people in the UK that maybe vote Labour, or he would like to vote Labour, that would oppose this sort of action. I think that's his priority.
And Colonel Kemp, just to reiterate, I don't think a lot of people in the West seem quite clear about how dangerous a nuclear Iran would be, particularly with the type of fundamentalist Islamic zealotry that we see from the Ayatollah. Of course, war is always painful, but to not act could have been potentially much, much more painful for the West.
Yeah, I mean, the Iranian regime, it was built on death to America, death to Britain, death to Israel. And those aren't just words. They've carried out violent actions, killing British soldiers in Afghanistan and Iraq, targeting the UK for attack, targeting Israel, of course, and the United States of America. If these people are allowed to have nuclear weapons, then they'll do more than just killing a few thousand people. They will be able to kill tens or hundreds of thousands of people. So preventing them, they're our enemies. They effectively declared war on us in 1979. Preventing them from getting that nuclear capability is extremely important for the defence of this country, as well as security in the whole of the Middle East and the world. And the UK is supposed to be, or is, a permanent member of the UN Security Council. And we have responsibilities in relation to securing the world. And also, we're signatories to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. We have obligations to prevent nuclear proliferation.
And Colonel Kemp, we just heard a very moving message from a woman in Iran who wants her country to go back to the pre-Islamic Revolution era. She wants freedom, she wants liberty, and she wants to see the back of the Ayatollah. Do you think that's permissible? Do you think her dream is possible? Could we see the Ayatollah be toppled and a return to a more democratic foundation for Iran?
Well, I think so, yes. Obviously, no one can foresee the future, but I know that the Iranian regime is hated by the majority of the people in Iran. They want it gone, and we've heard some of the reasons why just now. They've attempted uprisings in the past, and on 2 occasions recently, I think the United States failed to give them the kind of support they needed, even rhetorical support or diplomatic support. What they've seen now, what they're seeing now, is the utter humiliation of the regime by Israel and by the United States. They're seeing how weak this regime is. We've now got an Iranian regime, one of the most powerful countries in the Middle East, that is incapable of defending itself. The IDF, the Israeli Air Force, has just as much freedom of flight and movement over Tehran as it does over Tel Aviv. They have been lashing out against Israel in response to this, and their missile attacks, they fired about 500 missiles, or maybe more, in the last week, have been relatively inconsequential. Yes, around 25 people have died, and that is terrible, but strategically, they've had no impact really whatsoever on Israel. And the people in Iran are seeing this, and I hope that they will take it into their hands to rise up and exploit the weakness of the regime. Israel is doing everything it can to smash this regime to pieces, obviously firing only at military targets and militarily relevant regime targets, but nevertheless is weakening this regime even more.
OK, Colonel Richard Kemp, thank you very much for joining us. Former British Army Commander, thanks for your time. Quick bit of reaction now from my guests in the studio. Perhaps Samuel Sweek, I could first turn to you. We heard there from an Iranian woman inside Tehran first who was saying she wants this regime gone. Women in particular cannot live freely in Iran. Don't the people who support Palestine Action understand that the supporting Palestine at any cost enables psychopaths like the Ayatollah to stay in power?
Well, no, I don't really think these two things are linked. Obviously, I wholly sympathise with the Iranian women on the film there. I can't imagine the levels of repression she must feel, but this is a completely separate issue.
But Tehran funds Hamas. Hamas invaded Israel. What's happened, everything since then has been because of Iran funding Hamas. They are linked, Samuel. They're intrinsically linked.
But no, I don't see it as being like that at all. I see it as, I mean, look at the US, the UK, the EU. That is people who are funding what is happening, sorry, what Israel is doing. People who are isolated and countries who are isolated will latch on to people who are going to support their causes, who are going to be allies for them. And that is not always in the interest of peace. I don't want to see a single person in any of these countries killed. I want there to be peace, and I think that to do that, we have to take all of the arms out of the situation.
OK. Samuel, thank you very much. Adam Cherry, quick word from you. Do you think this is now getting to the point where Britain is looking like a bit of a spare part on the world stage?
Yeah, 100%. I think the Israeli action in the last week or so definitely betrays that. Well, not even just Israel, the Americans as well. Like I said earlier, you know, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom coming back from a G7 summit confidently saying, well, not 100%, but in terms saying, I don't think the US will do this, and then he wakes up the next morning, oh dear, I didn't know that, and they've gone ahead and done it.
Yeah, thank you very much. It almost sounds funny. Adam Cherry, Samuel Sweet, thank you very much. A superb debate. Now, coming up next, has Nigel Farage turned into Robin Hood? There he is, smiling away in his green tights. Found out why? They're calling him the Robin Hood, new Farage. Next with me, Mike Daubney on GB News.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we are proud to stand for you, for the Britain you love, for the communities you live in. That's what makes us the fearless champions of Britain. Its voices and its values. Because we, at GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our viewers and listeners. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/your say. There, you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/your say, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes and Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What is the state of our economy? What is the state of our National Health Service? What is the state of our schools?
What on earth is going on?
Understanding Britain means understanding the state we are in. This is State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays from 8 p.m. on GB News.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It is coming up to 4:30. You with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Nigel Farage said he will reinstate non-dom status for wealthy entrepreneurs, but only if they cough up a £250,000 fee. But he also says that will be handed to the lowest income British workers. They'll be issued with a so-called Britannia card after that £250,000 payment. That'll make them exempt from paying inheritance tax. It sounds a bit like socialism, but is it a great idea? Well, let's bring in now GB News political editor Chris Hope, who was at that launch speech this morning in central London at 9 a.m, channeling his inner Robin Hood. Who'd have thought it? Taken from the rich and given to the poor. Sounds like Jeremy Corbyn.
Martin, great to see you again. It's quite discombobulating because people think, hang on, aren't they a right-wing party? Aren't they doing deals with the Tory party? Isn't Robert Jenrick signing up to some kind of power share in the next government? Well, no, not really. Here you have Reform UK. I think think also it's a wrong footing both major parties with this idea. They're not calling it the Robin Hood tax. I think that was in today's Times newspaper. But the idea simply is this: take money from the rich, like you, Martin, maybe, and give it to the poor.
Only, mate.
No, I'm joking, of course. But it's non-doms. It's these 120,000, as was, people who pay a fee to live in the UK and then avoid paying tax on their global earnings. That's fallen down to 80,000. Some say that's because of the Labour government's policy. So the Reform Party wants to pull them back with an offer of £250,000 for a decade. Pay that, come here. You won't pay any inheritance tax for 20 years. If you die, your family won't on your estate, and you won't be taxed on offshore income, but you will pay income tax, stamp duty, national insurance and VAT. They think they can, if maybe 10,000 of these people sign up for this, for the so-called Britannia cards, they think give maybe £1,000 each to those on less than 23,000 a year. It's giving from the rich to the poor. But I was worried about this at this press conference, because I thought, what about you might have criminals? I mean, who is getting the benefit of this? And here's what Nigel Farage told us this morning.
How have you come to this level, this money you're giving away from this non-doms figure? And to Zia Youssef, also to you, do you worry it might be misappropriated? Will it go to two people on the same income in the same family, doubling up? Or will even criminals get it?
Well, hang on a second. You know, this is for working people. You know, this is for, rather like our child tax credits, it's for working people. We're doing everything we can. We've said from the start that we are the party of working people. We are the party of those that get up early in the morning and go to work. We're the party of people who don't want to go on benefits. They want, for their own sense of pride, to keep on working, but find themselves, in many situations, very little better off than the couple that live next door and choose not to work as a lifestyle choice. So once again, we're doing something here aimed at working people. So the idea that criminals are going to get it, etc., just is not going to be the case, all right? How do we reach the figure? It's about finding a figure that we think lots of people will pay, because what we want are lots and lots of job creators, lots and lots of risk takers, lots and lots of entrepreneurs to come into our country. We believe we've got this figure right, and I am certain, I am absolutely certain, this would have a big uptake in the first few years.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with that. And, you know, the point about criminals getting taxpayer money, I mean, we all know the tens of billions that have been lost to, frankly, incompetence as a result of a government policy. I mean, we could spend an hour talking about all the COVID fraud, for example, which is still entirely unaccounted for. So that is a really good point. And, you know, Nigel's Prime Minister and Reform government will set to work to put a stop to all of that stuff. That's a competence issue. It's not going to happen with this programme. And as Nigel said, look, we look to price it based on a number that people would love to pay. Yeah. That's a really important point. This is not taxing people who are working hard in this country against their wishes and redistributing it. This is money coming from people who would not otherwise be here. And remember, it is just the start of their economic relationship with the Exchequer.
That is Zia Youssef, of course, former chairman, now the Doge unit chief. I should say, Martin, that Italy bill you €200,000 a year for a similar deal. Greece, $100,000 a year. So £250,000 over 10 years is quite a good deal. The other parties, though, we'll hear from Jonathan Reynolds in the next hour, the business secretary. We've just been talking to him for GB News, but the Tories say it's fantasy economics. But I do think it's a bit discombobulating for the main parties. Yet again, Farage is boxing clever around the margins of what we think they should be, and he's not going into the kind of the tram lines we expect.
It's interesting because the notion of taking from very wealthy foreigners and giving to poorer Britons is a very left-wing idea. And it's the same with the two-child benefit cap. There's quite a lot coming out of reform which makes them appeal, I think, in a strategic way to the red wall, to people perhaps in places like Bassett Law, in places like Bolsover, Nottinghamshire, Robin Hood. That's why the Robin Hood thing, it works. I'm from Nottingham. OK, because Robin Hood is remembered as a good guy. Let's get a picture that we made, a bit of fun here. Chat's GPT, you can ask it to do anything these days. We have Nigel Farage as Robin Hood. Robin Hood is there outside Big Ben. There it is. I mean, I think he'll like that kind of thing because, again, it's making the political left march to Farage's tune, or at least answer serious questions, taking from wealthy sheikhs and oligarchs and giving to people who get up at 5 in the morning and go and dig trenches. I think it's clever politics.
Exactly. They didn't use the word sheikhs, but everything else you're saying there is out the script of Reform UK. Zia Yusuf, I spoke to him for the channel this morning after 10 o'clock, if you want to go back on YouTube. He said exactly that. They're going to bat for those who get up early when other people's curtains are drawn and go to work, and that's what he's doing. I just think, I say it again, people who think Reform and the Tories are going to merge are not watching GB News closely enough, are not seeing what's happening here. This party is going outside of the normal rules on politics to try and create something new.
It's fascinating stuff, and I'm really, really looking forward to what Jonathan Reynolds says to you. We'll catch you up in the next hour. Chris, the best in the business, as ever. Thank you very, very much for coming and see us in the studio. Loads more still to come to now at 5 o'clock, including that Jonathan Reynolds hit with Farage, but also the great brain drain. Why do most high achievers leave their hometown? That's next, but first, here's your latest news headlines with Katie Bowen.
Good afternoon. The top stories this hour. The RAF has evacuated 63 British nationals from Israel to Cyprus, and a British national has been injured in Israel during missile attacks by Iran. Foreign Secretary David Lammy has spoken following those US strikes.
We don't yet know precisely how far the US strikes have set back Iran's nuclear programme.
The Home Secretary says she's prescribed Palestine Action and will lay an order before Parliament next week. At least 2 people have been arrested in Trafalgar Square today. Lowering energy costs for thousands of businesses by scrapping green levies will form a central part of the government's new 10-year industrial strategy. The plan's been unveiled today. A man has been charged with the murder of Annabelle Rook, found fatally stabbed after a gas explosion at her home in North London. And the mass rollout of weight loss jabs on the NHS in England will begin today as GPs are allowed to prescribe the drugs for the first time. Those are the latest headlines for now. More news at the top of the hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Afternoon, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. After a fresher feel for many today, we'll see the temperatures rise and the humidity building a little tomorrow. A bit of a messy day tomorrow. Could be quite wet in places, but some areas will see some summer sunshine. Been some good spells of sunshine around today and will be through the evening. Still a few showers in northwest Scotland and the cloud thickening tonight across Northern Ireland, turning damp here, and by morning that rain spreading into southern Scotland, northern England and North Wales. Some heavy rain too likely here, especially over the hills. Quite a warm night, temperatures holding up in the mid-teens for most. A dull, damp start then for northwest England, North Wales, southwest Scotland tomorrow. We should see the rain and drizzle pulling away from Northern Ireland, and it may be a bright start across the far northeast of Scotland, but elsewhere further south, we'll see rain and drizzle moving through the central belt. As I said, quite a wet start for northwest England, and still pretty dull and damp for Northern Ireland, North Wales too. Some patchy rain over the Midlands, South Wales, southwest England, but it should be a dry start across the southeast. Probably not seeing much rain at all here. It will move its way eastwards, but staying pretty soggy over the Pennines, the hills of southern Scotland also. But generally getting a bit brighter as we go through the day. And as the cloud breaks over the Midlands, East Wales, East Anglia, it could feel quite warm and humid with some sunshine lifting the temperatures into the mid-20s, 25, perhaps even a degree or so higher. As I said, feeling quite humid, certainly for England and Wales. A little fresher for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but we may well get some afternoon sunshine here. Wednesday is also a bit of a mishmash with some more persistent cloud over the Midlands, parts of South Wales, a little bit of showery rain, but many areas looking dry on Wednesday, certainly a drier day for northwest England and North Wales. Just the threat later on of some thundery showers coming up from the south, so that's something we need to watch as the temperatures rise further, that warmth and humidity with temperatures getting up into the high 20s across parts of the southeast.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. The A92 Tay Road Bridge is closed to double-decker vehicles with a speed limit of 30 miles per hour due to high winds. The A44 is closed for resurfacing. In Greater London, the M25 anti-clockwise between junctions 29 and 28 has 2 lanes closed due to a collision. In Bristol, the M49 northbound faces a delay from congestion. In Kent, the A20 eastbound faces disruption from a broken down vehicle. And on the trains, South Western Railway advises against travel through Wimbledon, and Southern reports issues between Chichester and Havant. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Welcome back. It's 20 to 5. You're with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, a new study has found that 6 in 10 young people outside of London who achieve outstanding GCSE grades have moved away from their hometown by the age of 32. Now, the vast majority of talented graduates end up in London, whilst those who return to and stay in their hometown tend to have lower levels of education. This I find heartbreaking. It's a subject very close to my heart, and I know it is my next guest too. And that is the Senior Lecturer in Inequality and the Anarchist, Dr. Lisa Mackenzie. Lisa, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. It genuinely is. And I tell you what, this is basically my life. I went to Nottingham University Careers Advice Service when I graduated. I said to them, I want to be a journalist. I'd like to work in advertising. They said, well, there's no work for you around here, my son. Have you ever thought about becoming a teacher? Now, a laudable profession, but quite clearly I had to leave Nottingham. That's where you come from also. I find it heartbreaking that the opportunity isn't there for people in their home cities, so inexorably they get drawn towards London, a life of high rent and high pressure.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think it's really interesting what you said about, the journalism, because we've even got less local journalism now than we've ever had. And local journalism has always been extremely important in holding local councils to account. So the fact that actually, if you want to be in any of the creative industries, if you want to be in politics, business or finance, you have got to leave the provincial cities. And that is awful for the city, because the talent and the people that would protect and stand for that city then move. I moved to London and, because of the high rents, I've had to come back. And I'm an absolute champion of where I live. But unfortunately, it's very difficult to keep our young people, not just in the cities, but in our towns and even in the villages. If they want to do anything that, that is not sort of very low skilled mandatory work, they have to leave. And, this is one of the great, I suppose, failures of several governments, that they just haven't spread the sort of creativity and the wealth around the country.
And something else we create, another problem, education. That man, Tony Blair, he made us into a nation of graduates. He said that was the only way to be a success in life. And you and I both know that the demographic least likely to attend university, white working class lads, and they would have been down the pits. They would have had full employment. You didn't need a degree back in the days where we had full industry, Lisa Mackenzie. But now we have a situation where to be even classified as relevant or worthwhile as a human being, you need a degree. And I think we've grossly failed our young people. I sincerely do.
We really have failed our young people, and especially working class, white working class lads. Where I live now, which is in the mining villages of Nottinghamshire, there is some great initiatives here at the moment that I would say, Martin, come and have a look. Where what we're trying to do is train our young lads into looking after the the environment that they live in, the countryside, because in our community there's a lot of countryside. So, we are trying to sort of fight this, but obviously these sorts of jobs, looking after the countryside, making things with your hands nowadays, all the stuff that white working class lads do well is obviously not paid well. And so, unfortunately, for those that want to do, they want to do something more creative or in politics, they really have to leave.
Yeah. What is that work? Look, I'm going to come. What is it? You said come and have a look. I will come. What is it?
It's basically alternative provision school in the mining communities, and they teach kids how to fish and how to look after fish, the fishing industry. So, ponds, Newstead Abbey, which is close to where I live. Wow. The kids look after the environment there. And it's, you know, it's such a fantastic thing that they're doing for white working class kids. Well, they are white working class kids. But as I said, you know, these are worthwhile, brilliant jobs, but, you know, just not paid a lot of money.
Yeah, I know the area well. I used to have a girlfriend lived in Ravenshead. I know Newstead Abbey. There's a great boozer opposite there. I'm going to come and see you. We're going to do this. I'm going to come and see this initiative. We're going to do it because it just sounds a wonderful thing. Anything that supports those communities gets my vote. Lisa McKenzie, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Have we got time for another question? I think we have. Lisa, what apart from initiatives like this, what do we need to do? As you said, failures of successive governments. We've heard about levelling up. We've heard about the Northern Powerhouse. None of it has ever worked.
Never worked. At the moment, I mean, the other thing that I'm doing at the moment in Ashfield, Lee Anderson's constituency, which is where I'm from, we've just got £1 million for the creative industries. So I'm also writing a play with some young girls.
Yeah.
So, you know, what's another thing that is actually we're trying to do is, you know, give young working class kids in our communities, you know, an opportunity to do other things than work in warehouses. So, you know, what we need is the resources. We can do the rest. We've got talent.
Yeah, look, I love having you on the show. I really, really do. And I'm going to come and see that thing at Newstead Abbey. I've been fishing in years. I'd love to do that. Lisa McKenzie, a pleasure to have your company. Sincerely is Senior Lecturer in Inequality and Anarchist. Dr. Lisa McKenzie. There you go. You heard it on TV. I can't back out of it now. Now, if you're in search of some holiday sun this year, then here is the forecast for some of the top European destinations.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Following a peak in the temperatures across the western Mediterranean in the last few days, it is now turning fresher. There are a few showers to watch out for, particularly across areas of Iberia. Generally, though, further east, it's high pressure in charge, and that's allowing the heat to also transfer eastwards. Particularly parts of northern Italy into the Balkans will see those temperatures climbing, but the high pressure also means there'll be plentiful amounts of sunshine for these regions right throughout the week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Westminster, the ultimate clique.
And you're fighting like rats in a sack.
But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask.
OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician.
Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Sally first. How can this be good?
I'm not sure if it's good, but I wouldn't say it's bad. I would defend everyone's choice to, if they can afford it, send their child to whatever care facility that they choose. And I think when you're talking about very young preschool children, there's an awful lot of life ahead of them where, you know, they can learn that life isn't always going to shower you with rose petals and tasting menus. If it suits the parents, if it suits the child, why not? And we are talking about a very small sector of society who, A, can afford this sort of option with your preschool childcare, and it's for a very short time. So there's obviously a market for it. They've come all the way over from Singapore to set this up. It's their first outpost in the UK. So, yeah, good luck. If there's a gap in the market, fill it.
I know I'm a mother of 4 and I've got my own business, and even when we sit down for tea at night, I'm still on my phone, I'm still emailing. So for me, it's kind of like, I'm wondering if these parents are working 24/7 and they're trying to offset the guilt because they're really time poor with the kids. I mean, I've got 4 boys and I do think I naturally pamper them, because I don't know about you, Stephen, but when I was growing up, I was constantly told I didn't even know I was born, whatever that means. And so it's like, I think each generation we pamper our kids even more, you know?
But Davinia, when you're sitting down with your kids having dinner, are you giving them a crisp, golden Spanaca pita with refreshing tzatziki, followed by smoky jambalaya studded with free-range chicken and prawns? Or are they getting beans on toast?
Funnily enough, Stephen, that's a no.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 10 to 5. You with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, a BBC News presenter appeared to reject gender-neutral language during a live television broadcast. Here's Martine Croxall correcting the woke auto-cue.
London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine has released research which says that nearly 600 heat-related deaths are expected in the UK. Malcolm Mystery, who is involved in the research, says that the aged, pregnant people, women, and those with pre-existing health conditions need to take...
Now, that correction of pregnant people, which went women, and rolled her eyes slightly, it earned her the title of J.K. Rowling's favourite BBC presenter. Well, Martine took to X, formerly Twitter, and she said this: a huge thank you to everyone who has chosen to follow me today for whatever reason. It's been quite a ride. Now, isn't it extraordinary? That's how somebody says something which is factually true, is biologically true, and in the eyes of the law, the Supreme Court, it is now legally true. Because you can't be a pregnant person, you're a woman. You're a pregnant woman. Only women can get pregnant. Now, sue me. You think that's controversial. It isn't. It's the position of biology, of fact, and of the Supreme Court ruling. And she's been lauded as a hero for saying that. And it's not the first time she's taken task with the BBC herself and 3 colleagues. She felt she was unfairly dismissed. She took the BBC to court and she won. She can pretty much say whatever she wants. She's more or less untouchable. And in that one word, just by saying woman, she's almost shattered the illusion, the grasp of the wokerati and what they have over the BBC. It's been viewed millions and millions and millions of times now all around the world. And each country that wakes up, it goes around the world a little bit further. It's an incredible state of affairs that to simply state the truth, you are described as a hero. As I said, Croxall was demoted by the BBC along 3 other veteran anchors. They thought they had an ageism case. She sued, and after being paid to sit at home for 2 years, she settled out of court and then returned to the news anchor desk, where she continues to say things like a woman. We were hoping to be joined by Danny Kelly. Now, he's just got back from Greece, and I think he's looking a bit like a pregnant person himself after the endless buffets and beers he had. But he works at the BBC, and he told me that these kind of things are routine in the newsroom. The BBC top brass, the editorial directors, take positions on practically everything. It's then written into the script, and you're expected to follow the script if you're a presenter, except in this instance, that didn't happen. Now, loads of you have been getting in touch. And on that topic of this story here, Susan says, thank God, finally, some sense at the BBC. And that is the opinion. It's like finally that one small change of correcting pregnant people to women is seen like another breakthrough, the wokerati losing their grip on the corridors of power. And James quickly adds this: we've completely lost the plot. Pregnant people, they don't exist. It's women. Martine Croxall was correct. Now, stick with us, because up next we'll be exploring Nigel Farage's Robin Hood tax. Taken from the rich, given to the poor. Sounds a bit socialist. Could it catch on? That's next, but first, here's your weather.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Afternoon, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. After a fresher feel for many today, we'll see the temperatures rise and the humidity building a little tomorrow. A bit of a messy day tomorrow. Could be quite wet in places, but some areas will see some summer sunshine. Been some good spells of sunshine around today and will be through the evening. Still a few showers in northwest Scotland and the cloud thickening tonight across Northern Ireland, turning damp here, and by morning that rain spreading into southern Scotland, northern England and North Wales. Some heavy rain too likely here, especially over the hills. Quite a warm night, temperatures holding up in the mid-teens for most. A dull, damp start then for northwest England, North Wales, southwest Scotland tomorrow. We should see the rain and drizzle pulling away from Northern Ireland, and it may be a bright start across the far northeast of Scotland, but elsewhere further south we'll see rain and drizzle moving through the central belt. As I said, quite a wet start for northwest England, and still pretty dull and damp for Northern Ireland, North Wales too. Some patchy rain over the Midlands, South Wales, southwest England, but it should be a dry start across the southeast. Probably not seeing much rain at all here. It will move its way eastwards, but staying pretty soggy over the Pennines, the hills of southern Scotland also. But generally getting a bit brighter as we go through the day. And as the cloud breaks over the Midlands, East Wales, East Anglia, it could feel quite warm and humid with some sunshine lifting the temperatures into the mid-20s, 25, perhaps even a degree or so higher. As I said, feeling quite humid, certainly for England and Wales, a little fresher for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but we may well get some afternoon sunshine here. Wednesday is also a bit of a mishmash with some more persistent cloud over the Midlands, parts of South Wales, a little bit of showery rain, but many areas looking dry on Wednesday, certainly a drier day for northwest England and North Wales. Just the threat later on of some thundery showers coming up from the south, so that's something we need to watch as the temperatures rise further, that warmth and humidity with temperatures getting up into the high 20s across parts of the southeast.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon, this is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. The A720 eastbound off-slip at Miller Hill Junction has delays due to a broken down vehicle. The A44 between Langerig and Trodiralt is closed for resurfacing. In North Yorkshire, the A64 eastbound has one lane closed between A659 Tadcaster West and East due to a breakdown. Normal traffic is expected after 5:15. In London, on the M25 anti-clockwise, two lanes are closed between junctions 29 and 28 due to a collision, with restoration after 7. And on the trains, major disruptions impact services through Wimbledon, with no travel advised. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
We're kick-starting summer with your chance to win our biggest cash prize to date, as there's an incredible £54,321 in tax-free cash to be won. What would you spend it on? A brand new car, the holiday of a lifetime, or just sit back, relax and remove some of those day-to-day financial stresses? For another chance to win, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Beth.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie's here.
I'm Michelle Duke, Britain's News Channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GB News family with you on any device. And as long as you have an internet connection, tune in to GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions, but every Friday night at 9 p.m. you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very, very good afternoon to you and a happy Monday. It's 5 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, hundreds of protesters took to the streets of London today to show support for Palestine Action, despite them being prescribed as a terrorist organisation. Now, the protests had a strict 3 p.m. curfew. Have the cops been making mass arrests?
All the British public that we're doing everything we can to stabilise the situation, to de-escalate the situation, and to get to a negotiated outcome.
Yeah, so Keir Starmer called for de-escalation in Iran. The trouble is, nobody was listening because both Donald Trump and Israel then bombed Iran without even telling our Prime Minister, by all accounts. Keir Starmer paints himself as an international statesman, but is he becoming increasingly irrelevant on the world stage? And Reform UK leader Nigel Farage today unveiled a so-called Robin Hood tax that takes £250,000 from minted foreigners and to give £600 cash bonuses to the poorest British workers. Is this robbing from the rich to give to the poor simply socialism in disguise, or does it have the makings of a great British idea? And Bournemouth Council has been blasted as both woke and broke after it cancelled the town's much-loved air show. Town hall bigwigs claim they can't afford the £250,000 it takes to run it, although it does rake in £16 million for the local economy. I'll be joined by a furious local armed forces veteran to give his verdict on this ridiculous situation. That's all coming in your next hour. Once the show, it's a pleasure to have your company. Nigel Farage today put the cat amongst the pigeons once again by unveiling a new Robin Hood tax. That's right. A man who always painted himself as a Thatcherite is now proposing that we take from the rich and give to the poor. But here's the rub. It's taking from the very richest foreigners. Oligarchs, potentially, those coming from the Arabian world, the Middle East. Very, very wealthy people paying a one-off fee of £250,000 for 10 years of tax-free access, no inheritance tax, no hidden gotchas, to welcome back more than 7,000 non-doms that have left the United Kingdom since the Labour Party came into power at a net loss of £32.4 billion to the Exchequer by 2035. Is it socialism, the kind of Corbynism that has no place in a so-called right-wing party, or is there something of a seed of a great idea in this? We put that question to Jonathan Reynolds, the business secretary, to see what he makes of it. That's coming up shortly. Stay tuned. Get in touch usual way. GBNews.com/your say to have your say. Now it's time for your headlines with Katie Bowen.
Martin, thank you. The top stories at 5 minutes past 5. The RAF has evacuated 63 British nationals from Israel to Cyprus, with more flights to come. Foreign Secretary David Lammy has told the Commons this afternoon. That's as a British national has been injured in Israel during missile attacks by Iran. The government has also issued a warning recommending that UK citizens in Qatar shelter in place until further notice. Qatar has also just announced that it is temporarily shutting its airspace. President Trump has hailed bullseye strikes which caused monumental damage to Iran's nuclear sites. Iran has vowed a decisive response. Israel's military says it's launched a new attack on access routes to one of those sites, Fordo. President Trump has now floated the possibility of leadership change in Iran hours after his team said replacing the regime was not the aim of the US strikes over the weekend. So Keir Starmer's warned that there's a risk of the Middle East crisis spiralling beyond the region. The American president has also called for oil prices to be kept down amid fears that ongoing fighting in the Middle East could cause them to spike. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign minister met Vladimir Putin at the Kremlin earlier today. Here's what Foreign Secretary David Lammy said a short while ago.
We don't yet know precisely how far the US strikes have set back Iran's nuclear program, but there remains the need for a durable diplomatic solution. Strikes cannot destroy the knowledge Iran has acquired over several decades, nor any regime ambition to deploy that knowledge to build a nuclear weapon.
Elsewhere, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says she's decided to prescribe Palestine Action and will lay an order before Parliament next week, which, if passed, will make membership and support for the protest group illegal. That's as the Metropolitan Police Chief, Sir Mark Rowley, has expressed his shock and frustration at a protest held today in support of Palestine Action. Protesters clashed with police and at least 2 people have been arrested at the protest as we know it. On Friday, Palestine Action activists broke into RAF Brize Norton in Oxfordshire and sprayed 2 military planes with red paint in protest of the UK's support of Israel over the war in Gaza, which the Chancellor has called totally unacceptable. Plans to lower energy costs for thousands of businesses by exempting them from some green energy levies have been set out as part of the government's new 10-year industrial strategy. The plan may slash energy bills by up to 25% for more than 7,000 UK businesses. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer called the industrial strategy a turning point for Britain's economy by supporting key industries where there is potential for growth. Acting Shadow Energy Secretary Andrew Bowie criticised the plans, saying the UK needed a serious approach to energy policy. A man has been charged with the murder of a woman found fatally stabbed after a gas explosion at her home in North London. 44-year-old Clifton George was also charged with arson with intent to endanger life after 36-year-old Annabelle Rook was found fatally injured in Stoke Newington just before 5 a.m. last Tuesday. Mr George, who was found with slash injuries, is due to appear at Thames Magistrates Court today. A West Yorkshire police officer who had been reported missing has been found dead, the force has confirmed. Charlie Mitchell, a 26-year-old patrol officer from Halifax, was reported missing from his home in Leeds on Saturday. West Yorkshire police said officers searching St Aidan's Nature Reserve near Leeds found his body at around 5:30 yesterday afternoon. The death is not being treated as suspicious. The mass rollout of weight loss jabs on the NHS in England will begin today as GPs are allowed to prescribe the drugs for the first time. Around 220,000 people with greatest need are expected to receive Mounjaro through the NHS over the next 3 years. It's an anti-diabetic drug which lowers blood sugar levels and slows down how quickly food is digested. From today, GPs in England will be able to prescribe Mounjaro to severely obese people who also suffer from a range of other health problems. The medicine makes you feel fuller, so you eat less. In clinical trials, people taking it has lost 20% of their body weight. And the UK and Ukraine will work together more closely on industrial military production, Sir Keir Starmer has said after meeting with Volodymyr Zelenskyy in Downing Street today. President Zelenskyy also met with the King at Windsor Castle. Mr Zelenskyy has travelled to the UK to discuss his country's defences ahead of a NATO summit that starts tomorrow. Those are your latest GB News headlines. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's market. The pound will buy you $1.3499 and €1.1698. The price of gold is £2,510.14 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 8,757 points.
My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Thank you, Katie. But we've got to say I'm loving the new punchy half-past-the-hour bulletins. I digress. Back to our top story. Nigel Farage said he will reinstate non-dom status for wealthy entrepreneurs, but only if they pay a £250,000 fee, which will be handed back to low-income British workers. Now, what's been called the Robin Hood raid. There's Mr Farage dressed as the men in tights. They'll be issued with the Britannia card, that's the name of it, after payment, making them exempt from paying inheritance tax. Well, to discuss the political fallout, I'm joined by GB News' political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, you were at that launch earlier on, and you just sat down with Jonathan Reynolds, the business secretary, to put to him Mr Farage's, how should we put it, raid on the rich to pay the poor.
Yes, it's odd, isn't it, for a party which is meant to be a right-wing party to do a tax rate on the rich. But this is why I think Reform UK are discombobulating the normal run of things. I met with a senior donor there, a very well-known businessman who I won't name for his privacy. But it's surprising people are going forward to this party. And it is a worry, I think, for the main parties. Very briefly, they want to take money away from non-DOMs, those who pay a fee to be here, but they're not taxed on their worldwide earnings, and they won't pay IHJ for 20 years. And they're all earning on their offshore income, but they will pay income tax. Take that money, charge them £250,000 a year, and give the money, give them a card, Britannia card, and give the money to the poor on the £23,000. It is taking from the rich to give them to the poor. It's an interesting idea. But earlier I spoke to Jonathan Reynolds. Today is a big day for Labour. They're announcing their industrial strategy. We know what reform we want to do, open up the coal mines, and that kind of thing. Let's see what Jonathan Reynolds told GB News moments ago.
Jonathan Reynolds, thank you for joining us on GB News. Why do we need an industrial strategy?
We need an industrial strategy because the kind of metrics we have of our economy as to how we're doing have been too low for some time. So we're very low levels of business investment, stagnant wages for many years. Communities, towns and cities up and down the country not feeling that the economy is working for them and making a difference to them. And the point of this industrial strategy, it's not some sort of old-fashioned thing, it's to look out and say, where are our strengths as an economy? What are we good at? What could we be even better at in future? But what are the barriers that are preventing that? And the common themes you will hear, there's no surprises to them. The highest industrial energy prices in the world. We have real problems in terms of access to skills and young people not getting opportunities. Access to finance, we have a great sort of innovative economy in the UK, but scale up is a problem. And place, have local areas got the tools they need to make this work for them? And what I am really proud of is that this is not just one of those government documents, we've had a few in the last few years, I know, that says here are the problems.
Gathers dust on the shelf.
Absolutely, or, you know, come as frequently as business secretaries at times. It doesn't just have that analysis, it has real measures in there to do that.
You mentioned their soaring bills, but some say that's in part at least because of the increasing cost of energy from the net zero target. And you mentioned skills. Some would say it's more difficult to employ people because of the national insurance on employees' wages and the increase in the living wage. So isn't this really strategy about answering problems created by your government?
I think that's not true. I mean, industrial energy prices rose by about 50% in real terms under the last government, so this is really where the problem was. Part of it is our exposure to gas. So gas sets the electricity price most days in the UK, as well as the heating, you know, that we use gas for. So we are exempting key parts of industry from some of the policy costs that add to the bill at present, and the idea is we'll use that to get to a point where we're not so dependent on gas and we have a lower trajectory for electricity prices. But it's really important to say we're going to do that in a way which isn't putting the burden onto households or onto other businesses. We're going to change how some of those policy levies work to make it easier to make this headroom.
So who's paying in the end then?
So basically we are going to change the way that the renewable industry is supported going forward. We'll put those costs over a longer term period. Okay. And we will use revenue from what is called the ETS, that's the emissions trading scheme. That's where big businesses pay because of their impact on climate. We'll use the revenue for that in future to bring down bills. So it will go back to business.
Nigel Farage's Reform UK party says a different idea is to open up the mines in South Wales. How about that then?
No, I'm very proud to be from the mining areas, one of the great mining areas of this country, County Durham.
So you know miners in the past?
My entire family were miners. My dad was the first generation of my family not to be a miner. He was a fireman. I want my children, as well, I'm proud of my past and my heritage and where I'm from. I want my children to work in the city or in advanced manufacturing or in creative industries or in professional services. I want them to have the very best of what we see around the world, and I want it here for them in the UK. And I think someone like Nigel Farage, that's what he thinks working class people want, because he's a parody of that. He thinks that's what they might be thinking of. If you met anyone seriously, they wouldn't want the mines reopening. If I was coming here today to say the future prosperity of this country is on reopening,
but why not allow the market
mines?
to decide? If there are some people want to be miners, I think, you know, you open them up, see who wants to apply. If no one applies, they stay closed. Why not?
Well, because there's no custom for that anymore. We don't have coal-powered power stations anymore. So there's actually no one stopping if someone came with a planning application.
The steel plants
for a mine. I mean, they could do so, but there's no business for that. You've got to look to the future, rather than be. Nigel Farage is sort of, it's always about a yesterday, right?
Yes.
I want a better future, but I do think the foundational industry. So I'm talking about steel, ceramics, chemicals, materials, the ports. I do think they've been neglected by previous governments. I mean, you know, the steel industry, what we've inherited, and some of the things we've had to do to make a difference on that. So they're a part, these foundations are a part of this strategy, as well as those, you know, sectors like advanced manufacturing and the creative industry.
Sorry, one more on Reform UK. Nigel Farage has today announced plans for a so-called Robin Hood tax to take money raised from a levy on non-DOMs and give it to the poorer people under £23,000 a year, maybe worth up to £1,000 each a year. Why can't you do that?
Well, that would be a massive tax cut for billionaires. I mean, that would be a tax cut of
Not
proportions
jealous,
we've never seen before.
Okay.
So you'd have to put up taxes on working people by billions of pounds, or you'd have no NHS. I know that's probably reform policy as well, but you know, you'd have no public services.
Okay.
Like the principle of attracting talent is an important one. I mean, we've replaced a non-dom regime with a temporary regime. If you're here, that's very important. But if you live in the UK, you should pay your taxes here. But the idea of going to the richest people in society, who are paying quite a lot of tax under this government, and cutting those taxes, pretending that's in the interest of working people who'd have to pay to make up the shortfall, I think people will see through that.
Jonathan Reynolds, thank you for joining us today on GB News. Thank you.
OK, Jonathan Reynolds, the Business Secretary, making short shrift of Nigel Farage's Robin Hood tax.
The interesting thing about this, though, is that the fact of the matter is, you know, we have seen lots and lots of millionaires leave the country, jumping off what they think is a sinking ship. One every 45 minutes, Chris Hope. Over 7,000 at a projected loss of £32.4 billion by 2035. So I wonder if this kind of dangling the carrot that Nigel Farage is offering actually is a better policy than just taxing them out of the country.
Well, other countries do it too. Italy charges €200,000 a year and Greece €100,000 a year to come back into a country, live there, pay your taxes, but not on your global taxes. This idea here from Reform UK, £250,000 over 10 years, no inheritance tax if you die for over 20 years, and you're not taxed on offshore income, but you do pay income tax, you do pay national insurance, VAT, stamp duty, so it goes on. They think 2.5 million workers paid less than 23 grand a year could benefit up to £1,000 a year. It's quite easy to understand. Yes, it's being attacked there by Labour. I wouldn't surprise them doing that. But it does seem to me, I don't quite understand it. If they aren't in the UK and they're being brought back on shore, then how is it a benefit for rich people? I think it's simply persuading them to come back here.
Can I quickly ask you about one of the headline things about this reindustrialisation strategy, whatever you want to call it, and that is we have cripplingly high, eye-wateringly high, in fact the highest energy prices in the Western world. Underpinning that seems to be net zero, but Mr Reynolds there would not admit net zero is pushing bills up. It is.
Some would say it is, and of course we have our own, treasure, as it's called, the coal under the ground here. He says, didn't he, there's no market for it. And his argument against opening up those coal mines, which Nigel Farage has been pushing in South Wales, is that his dad is the first generation not to be a miner. He's from a family of miners in County Durham. I know your father was a miner, and I think we're subjudging is mining a noble trade or not, noble profession or not. He clearly thinks it's something which no one wants to do anymore. Some would say that's different.
Yeah, but you see, the Labour Party, I think, and previous governments just think the only way to be valid is to have a university degree, and the precise education communities that lost out the most are the mining belts that never have those jobs.
They're trying to retrain as apprentices if they can, but it's difficult.
All right, Chris, thank you very, very much. Let's move on now to that other story dominating the headlines today, and that is that Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, has confirmed plans to ban Palestine Action as a terror group because they caused havoc in central London this afternoon as police made a series of arrests. But in the last few moments, Jeremy Corbyn has condemned this, calling it absurd and authoritarian. Well, let's now get the thoughts of the author and the founder of Migration Films, and that's Matt Robinson. Matt, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have your company. Does Jeremy Corbyn have a point? Is it absurd to brand Palestine Action as a terrorist organisation?
Well, thank you for having me on the show, Martin. First and foremost, let's just make it very clear that Yvette Cooper has made a statement in Parliament that she wishes to proscribe Palestine Action. It hasn't happened yet. There will be a vote. So it's not a foregone conclusion as yet. Do I agree with Jeremy Corbyn? Yes, I do. Fully agree with Jeremy Corbyn's statement. I believe that Palestine Action, they hurt no one physically. They are actually taking action on behalf of millions of people in this country who can do nothing. People come out to protest peacefully, write to MPs, boycott. People do whatever they can. And the government still is complicit in this genocide, directly involved with this genocide. So that's why I believe...
Let me explain why I think they are hurting people. They're hurting them in the wallet. 25 million quid's worth of damage was carried out at RAF Briars Norton. That's money that the taxpayer will have to pay back. This is public property. RAF jets, that is public property paid for by you and I. So they are hurting people because we'll have to get out of bed earlier, go to work to pay off the bill that these thugs are amassing. You've lost the room when you're creating £55 million worth of criminal damage and counting. That's going too far, and that is why the Home Secretary thinks that this lot deserve special dispensation as a terrorist organisation.
Personally, I think you've lost the room when you are silent or approve of 60,000, minimum 60,000 people being killed in a genocide. I think you've lost the room when you support an illegal apartheid regime, which has been deemed by the United Nations to be an illegal occupying force, which is under current investigation by the International Criminal Court. No, by the, sorry, International Court of Justice, whose leaders... Oh, no, please, let me finish. Whose leaders are also have arrest warrants under the International Criminal Court. Now, I understand what you're saying about the taxpayer. Well, the taxpayer's money is paying for people to be bombed. Children to be killed.
They're not, are they? They're not specifically paying for children to be bombed. And let me put it to you, Palestine Action, people carrying placards in support of Iran, in support of the Ayatollah. There was a protest yesterday supporting the regime which directly funded Hamas. The regime which directly funded Hezbollah. Hamas started the terrorist invasion on October the 7th. Hamas are funded by Iran. This is all intertwined. And if you support the Ayatollah, you support Hamas. You support genocide. I put it back to you that these problems are interlinked and Palestine Action crossed the line.
Well, it depends where you get your facts from, doesn't it? As I've said before when I've come on this show.
What do you mean by that?
Sorry?
What do you mean by that? It depends where you get your facts from.
What do you mean by that? Depends where you get your facts from.
I don't take my facts, for example, from Hamas about casualty figures.
I've not come to talk about any proscribed organisation. I've come to talk about Pal Action. And I've come to talk about Pal Action and Yvette Cooper, who wants to proscribe Pal Action. And what I will talk about is the fact that Yvette Cooper has received over £200,000 in money from the Israeli lobby over the last 12 months. And what GB News should be doing, rather than asking people like me to come on and answer why should Pal Action be prescribed or not prescribed, you should be investigating the conflicts of interest of our politicians. Why does Yvette Cooper has to have over £200,000 in the last 12 months from the Israeli lobby?
Matt Robinson, Matt Robinson, look, we can't verify that. And anyway, listen.
You can.
You said, hang on, mate. You said a minute ago, you've invited me on to talk about Palestine Action, then you start going on in a different tangent about the Home Secretary and being lobbied. You specifically said, we're here to talk about Palestine Action, and now you're not. So they are going to be prescribed by the looks of it because the vote will go through because of the Labour Party's majority. What do you think will happen next? Do you think they'll continue to protest? And if so, they'll probably get arrested for it.
I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
Enlightening. Thanks for joining us, Matt Robinson. A pleasure to have you on the show. Author and founder of Migration Films, Matt Robinson. Now, moving on, we've got some breaking news. We've got some pictures for you from Downing Street, where Keir Starmer has met Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelenskyy, of course, to discuss the political fallout. I'm joined by GBNews' political editor, Chris. So let's try and get those pictures up if we can. These are pictures of, that's the famous Rose Garden there at Downing Street. Is it, Chris Hope, Zelenskyy with Keir Starmer?
That's right. So Zelenskyy there in the black. You see him there with Keir Starmer. He's meeting there with troops from Operation Interflex, which is this the way the UK is helping train up Ukrainian troops. Tens of thousands have been benefiting from this relationship. Difficult times right now for President Zelenskyy. A new war has broken out, we know vividly, don't we, between Iran and Israel. He's got to maintain support for his conflict and not make sure that is not pushed to the back of the pages. Tomorrow, of course, we're seeing Sir Keir Starmer in The Hague. He'll be meeting there with the NATO summit with other leaders there. It's very important, I think, for the Ukrainian leader to ensure that his battle ongoing with Russia is not forgotten.
Now, Chris Hope, it's fair to point out that whenever Volodymyr Zelenskyy comes into town, he tends to depart with a big bag of cash. We don't have a lot of cash at present here in Britain. We continue to hear about a £22 billion black hole, but yet we seem to be funding Ukraine to the tune of endless billions. Do you think the British taxpayer is starting to get a little bit tired of this now?
Well, certainly on social media, there's people saying, why are we doing this? And I have been trying to raise that with the Prime Minister when I get a chance. I last asked him at the Lancaster House Summit, goodness me, I think earlier this year from memory. And he said there, he justified it to our viewers and listeners by saying that unless the UK is forward-leaning into the problems on the continent of Europe, those problems always wash up on our doorsteps. Let's get ahead of it and shape it. We have got this centuries-long agreement with Ukraine to be part of what they're doing there in rebuilding that country from this war-torn state. Boris Johnson's involved, of course, and President Zelenskyy is very keen. We're looking at the quotes now. We're told by the Ukrainian leader that our help, this country's help to strengthen his army and to help Ukraine fight is so important, and they will stay strong with the support of us and other countries. But the time of this is on the eve of the NATO summit tomorrow.
OK, Chris, thank you very much. Now, still to come, residents in Rochdale say they feel unsafe as a convicted paedophile continues to live freely on their streets from one of the rape gangs there. That's next with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our viewers and listeners. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes and Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What is the state of our economy? What is the state of our National Health Service? What is the state of our schools?
What on earth is going on?
Understanding Britain means understanding the state we are in. This is State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays from 8 p.m. on GB News.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here We do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's approaching 5:29. You're with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News on this beautiful Monday afternoon. Now, neighbours in Rochdale say they feel unsafe as a grooming gang, a rape gang leader convicted of child rape, a paedophile, continues to live freely on their street more than a decade after his sentencing. Now, despite a deportation order, he remains in the UK due to a legal loophole and is now reportedly has a police protection at his home, where, of course, none of the survivors get any such VIP treatment. And I'm joined in the studio by the former Rochdale MP, Simon Danczuk. Simon, welcome to the show. This case simply beggars belief. It just seems to me we've completely lost sight of who the actual victims are. This individual has full protection, partying the night away, and those he raped and abused have to be re-traumatised by this story every single waking day.
Yes, absolutely. This rape gang leader is laughing at British justice and at the victims. There's no doubt about that. He got a paltry 2.5 years. That's how long he served for raping children. I mean, let that settle in. That's the little amount of time that he actually did. And he's still out there. He's living in the community. The victims are traumatised by the fact that he's around in the community. The neighbours are not happy about it. He's partying away. He's got a happy family life by all accounts, and yet the victims are being ignored. He's got police protection, as you point out, and yet the victims are not even thought of by the authorities. This can't be right in terms of British justice.
And in terms of that legal loophole, we hear all the time, don't we, about how people suddenly decide they're not Pakistani. They suddenly decide, no, I'm not a citizen of Pakistan anymore, tear up my passport, it renders the British state toothless, and it precipitates situations like this where convicted paedophiles are back among the communities that they so obviously violated.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll recall I was the MP for Rochdale from 2010 to 2017, and I campaigned for this individual to be sent back to Pakistan. I campaigned heavily. Theresa May was the Home Secretary at the time. I lobbied her personally about this very issue. 2014, we got a ruling that he should be sent back. He appealed it using legal aid, so the taxpayer were funded him to appeal this issue. 2018, we got a ruling again that he should be sent back to Pakistan, but then, as you point out, he ripped up his passport, his Pakistani passport, and they're not accepting him on that basis. That can't be right. Whatever, we have to put pressure on Pakistan. We need David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, to be saying to Pakistan, if you don't take these individuals back, we will stop all foreign aid and we will stop visas. There'll be no travel between the two countries until you take this person back.
It's a common sense idea, which means it probably won't happen. And instead, the Pakistani authorities are actually trying to horse trade to reopen an airline route between Pakistan and the United Kingdom, one that was closed in the past because it was deemed a terror risk. They're trying to bargain for the deportation of paedophiles. They actually want something back from us. A strong government would tell them to go whistle.
Yeah, absolutely. We should tell them to go and whistle. They're trying to get Pakistan International Airlines, PIA, going between London and Islamabad. That's not what we want anyway, not least on safety grounds as well. So we shouldn't be bargaining on this. But, you know, Starmer in recent days has been talking tough on this very issue. Well, the test is here. If Starmer doesn't send this paedophile back to Pakistan, then Starmer is all sound bites and no substance.
Do you think that the rape gang inquiry, when it gets going, it has to make a specific point of deportation of these foreign monsters? Has to be enshrined in any new deal. Otherwise, we have a mockery, situations like this, where we literally have paedophiles living in the same communities as their victims.
Yeah, and some of them have been returned. That's the good news. But not this individual and not a number of other individuals. That has to change. If this Labour government is serious about tackling this issue, then this will be the test. Return this particular paedophile, and if you don't, you're not taking the issue seriously.
Simon Danczuk, thanks for coming to see us today in the studio. I appreciate your time. I sincerely do. Former Rochdale MP Simon Danczuk, thank you. Appreciate it. Now, we've gone to the Home Office and also to Greater Manchester Police, but have had no reply as yet. But the Home Office have previously said they will do everything in our power to deport foreign nationals who commit heinous crimes here in the UK. The plane will come throughout the rest of the show, but first, if you're travelling home, here's your traffic and your travel update.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. High winds have closed the A92 Tay Road Bridge to double-deck vehicles with a speed limit of 30 miles per hour. The A44 is closed for resurfacing from Langerig to Trody-Route with diversions. In Northamptonshire, there are 10-minute delays on the A43 northbound. The M25 anti-clockwise between junctions 29 and 28 has an hour-long delay due to a collision. South Gloucestershire's M4 westbound between junctions 19 and 20 has 10-minute delays. And on the trains, disruptions affect South Western Railway through Wimbledon and cross-country between Bristol Temple Meads and Taunton. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. The headlines at 5:35. The RAF has evacuated 63 British nationals from Israel to Cyprus, and a British national has been injured in Israel during missile attacks by Iran. Foreign Secretary David Lammy has spoken following those US strikes.
We don't yet know precisely how far the US strikes have set back Iran's nuclear programme.
The Home Secretary says she's prescribed Palestine Action and will lay an order before Parliament next week. At least 2 people have been arrested in Trafalgar Square today. Lowering energy costs for thousands of businesses by scrapping green levies will form a central part of the government's new 10-year industrial strategy. The plan's been unveiled today. A man has been charged with the murder of Annabelle Rook, found fatally stabbed after a gas explosion at her home in North London. And the mass rollout of weight loss jabs in the NHS in England will begin today, by GPs are allowed to prescribe the drugs for the first time. Those are the latest headlines for now. More news at the top of the hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Afternoon, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. After a fresher feel for many today, we'll see the temperatures rise and the humidity building a little tomorrow. A bit of a messy day tomorrow. Could be quite wet in places, but some areas will see some summer sunshine. Been some good spells of sunshine around today and will be through the evening. Still a few showers in northwest Scotland and the cloud thickening tonight across Northern Ireland, turning damp here, and by morning that rain spreading into southern Scotland, northern England and North Wales. Some heavy rain too likely here, especially over the hills. Quite a warm night, temperatures holding up in the mid-teens for most. A dull, damp start then for northwest England, North Wales, southwest Scotland tomorrow. We should see the rain and drizzle pulling away from Northern Ireland, and it may be a bright start across the far northeast of Scotland, but elsewhere further south, we'll see rain and drizzle moving through the central belt. As I said, quite a wet start for northwest England, and still pretty dull and damp for Northern Ireland, North Wales too. Some patchy rain over the Midlands, South Wales, southwest England, but it should be a dry start across the southeast. Probably not seeing much rain at all here. It will move its way eastwards, but staying pretty soggy over the Pennines, the hills of southern Scotland also. But generally getting a bit brighter as we go through the day. And as the cloud breaks over the Midlands, East Wales, East Anglia, it could feel quite warm and humid with some sunshine lifting the temperatures into the mid-20s, 25, perhaps even a degree or so higher. As I said, feeling quite humid, certainly for England and Wales. A little fresher for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but we may well get some afternoon sunshine here. Wednesday is also a bit of a mishmash with some more persistent cloud over the Midlands, parts of South Wales, a little bit of showery rain, but many areas looking dry on Wednesday, certainly a drier day for North West England and North Wales. Just the threat later on of some thundery showers coming up from the south, so that's something we need to watch as the temperatures rise further, that warmth and humidity with temperatures getting up into the high 20s across parts of the southeast.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power?
Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber.
Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics.
We'll see where this ruling takes us.
These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Welcome back. It's 5:39. You're with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, Bournemouth's much-loved air show has been grounded this year permanently. The Liberal Democrat-run council says it's too pricey and too polluting. But locals, of course, are livid. The iconic event pulled in £60 million and 600,000 visitors last year. But now critics have called it a ban on fun and accused the council of killing tourism. Well, we can now speak with the Bournemouth resident and the former army veteran, Adam Elcock. Adam, welcome to the show. Pleasure to have your company. It's just incredible to me that £250,000 is hardly a huge sum of money. It brings in £60 million. They must have been that Diane Abbott's abacus. And also the fact that it's climate change is being banned. What on earth is going on?
It's just another nail in the coffin for Bournemouth by this Liberal Democrat-led council that it's a state of managed decline. They haven't got a clue how to spend money. You know, they're going to invest £250,000 into the air show to recover 60 million. It is a no-brainer for the local businesses. The people come here and enjoy the show. It's something like 1.5 million people every year come to the show. It's been going on for 16 years, and I don't know why the council won't get behind it. They can spend £8 million on a cycleway that 3 people will use, but they can't spend a fraction that actually brings benefit to the local community.
And Adam, when you've been on the show before, you've talked also about how the town has been ravaged by the use of hotels and housing by asylum seekers. They can always seem to find the money for that. Millions and millions of pounds, in fact, going to house asylum seekers in the same constituency. They can't raise £250,000 to get £60 million returned.
Absolutely. I mean, the town is in a state of decline, and you know, there's something like 700 asylum seekers being housed here at the moment. And if you were to equate that to the £250,000 they're trying to find for the air show, it's like £350 per asylum seeker. But all of that money at the moment is going in to house these sort of the boat visitors is just being wasted. The police have got to do a lot more for their money. The social services, the whole town is just ruined, and there's so much benefit that could come, joy, from putting the air show on, but that money has been diverted elsewhere. Such a poor decision by the council.
Do you think the problem is, Adam, we hear all the time that politicians just don't have a Scooby-Doo about how to run a business?
Well, they don't. Look at the Labour Party. I don't think a single one of them has ever owned or run a business. They're professional politicians, and they're failing at that. You know, if you said the words to them, cash flow, cash burn, I think it would just go over their head. They wouldn't have a clue. I mean, a £250,000 investment in the town, which they recover that money year upon year, would put £60 million back into the local economy. You know, the economy that is struggling, and there's some fantastic bars and restaurants and shops here, and they desperately want that footfall. It's a really bad decision.
Isn't it a better idea if people like yourself, you know, people who know how to run businesses, you're a successful businessman, no doubt you have a huge network of people down there. What about privatising the event? Just raise the money and then get whatever you take in, plough back into the town, regenerate the area. Maybe it's time to get the government out of it because they're useless.
Well, I think that'd just be the way to do it, because anything that the government touches just turns to dust. There is some very well-heeled, some enthusiastic businessmen in the town. We've got a very successful local festival already run, the Bournemouth Rugby Sevens. You know, the owner of that has already put himself forward and said he'd be more than happy to assist in putting on this event. And there's many other local businesses that would get involved as well. And that money would go straight back in to the community. You know, we'd make it a much more successful event.
And Adam, does it stick in your craws as a proud serviceman just to have this boiling down to climate change as well? It's like, oh, you know, it's an aircraft display. Oh, that's bad for the environment. We're going to give it the chop.
Yeah, I mean, that's a throwaway comment, isn't it, by the council? I bet there are no facts or statistics to back that point up. I mean, Bournemouth is a huge tourist destination. This weekend, tens of thousands of people here, bottlenecks of traffic everywhere, rubbish on the beach. I bet there was more harm done to the environment this weekend than there would be in this air show. I mean, it's a ludicrous comment for them to make.
And we're looking at the sort of magnificent sights on the screen now, like Lancaster bombers going across the sky. Of course, the iconic red arrows. We have to leave it there. Adam Elcock, thanks for joining. Always a pleasure to have your company. But we have some breaking news for you now, and it's this. There are reports that Iran has launched missiles towards US bases in Qatar, with several explosions heard over the Qatar capital, Doha. Just to repeat that, significant breaking news. We have reports coming into GB News that Iran has launched missiles towards US bases in Qatar, with several explosions heard over the Qatar capital of Doha. Now, the Ayatollah Khamenei did say there would be a significant response from Iran towards United States. Nobody expected them, though, to be launching missiles towards US bases in Qatar, that this will be a significant ramping up of the offensive by directly attacking American bases. This will be seen, I have no doubt whatsoever, as an act of outright war by the United States. To specifically repeat this news, breaking news, the reports that Iran has launched missiles towards US bases in Qatar, with several explosions heard over the Qatar capital of Doha. Further explosions have been heard, and now this will you can guarantee the implications of this will be America will be drawn more into this war. You may say that's already happened with those bunker busters taking out 3 key nuclear targets over the weekend. Donald Trump said those have been completely obliterated. And the Ayatollah Khamenei said there will be a significant act of revenge if that were to happen. Many experts saying that Iran specifically and directly attacking American targets would be a disastrous thing for them. If these reports are true that we have here, that is true. There are reports that Iran has launched missiles towards US bases in Qatar, with several explosions heard over the Qatar capital of Doha. Now, this will have huge implications as well for the exporting of oil. We've already heard about reports around threatening to close those straits, where something like 20% of the world's oil exports are going through Qatar, of course, also a huge oil-producing nation. This will be plunging those markets into turmoil. What will this mean for the price of oil, the price of petrol? But let's get back to basics here. This will be seen, no doubt, as a direct act of war against the United States if these reports are 100% verified. Iran has launched missiles towards US bases in Qatar, with several explosions heard over the Qatar capital of Doha. You know, this will be... And, of course, the comments here come as the RAF, we learned in this past couple of hours, has now evacuated 63 British nationals from Israel to Cyprus, with more flights to come. And the Foreign Secretary David Lammy has told the Commons this afternoon. And the government has also issued a warning recommending that UK citizens in Qatar shelter in place until further notice. So a significant escalation of the conflict in the Middle East. Reports come into GB News now that Iran has attacked a US base in Qatar. Significant breaking news story. Just to repeat, that's directly following on from the RAF has evacuated Israel to Cyprus, with more flights to come. We're going to get Mark White up in a short while. Just to recap, explosions over Qatar as Iran attacks a US base. Western officials have told Axios that Iran had fired 6 missiles towards at least one base in the Gulf country. Officials said earlier that the Al Udeid base, that's located just outside of Doha, was facing a credible threat. And the Trump administration officials are convening in Washington, D.C. And just to give some more information about this base, the base is home to the US CENTCOM's HQ, and British military personnel also serve there on rotation. Live shots on your screen of the skies over Doha. Of course, few hours ahead, darkness there across the capital city of Qatar. And it's, just to repeat, many planes have been removed from this base in recent weeks. We understand satellite imagery has shown this base was identified as a credible threat, credible target. And so evacuation of aircraft has been taking place. Just to repeat, breaking news if you are joining us. Explosions have been heard over Doha, the capital of Qatar, after Iran launched a missile attack on a US base in Qatar. Western officials told Axios that Iran had fired 6 missiles towards at least one base in the Gulf country. An official said earlier that the Al Udeid base, located just outside of Doha, was facing a credible threat. And just to repeat, Trump administration officials are convening in Washington, D.C. If these claims are verified, if it's proven that Iran has made a direct attack on the US strategic base, this will almost certainly be taken, I would think, by the Trump administration as an act of war. And there is also, we are receiving now reports of a US base in Iraq may be under fire as well. So 2 US bases in 2 neighbouring countries, Qatar and Iraq, we are now hearing are under attack. Several explosions heard over Doha. A Reuters witness said this evening, following Tehran's threats to retaliate against the US for strikes on those Iranian nuclear sites over the weekend. Donald Trump, of course, had boasted that those sites had been completely obliterated. But Iran has positioned missile launchers on US forces. This is a significant development in the conflict in the Middle East. We have Mark White, GBNews' home and security editor, now joining us. Mark, this is the escalation everybody feared would happen. The Ayatollah seems to be directly striking back against US military bases.
Yes, and indeed they had been clearly aware of some kind of an intelligence briefing, some intelligence that pointed to Qatar as being a possible target, because earlier in the day, a few hours ago, the US Embassy put out a warning to all US citizens in Qatar to shelter in place until further notice. So the intelligence that they were getting, whoever that came from, indicated that this base, the Al Udeid Air Base, the biggest US air base in the Middle East, might well be the target in the coming hours. And that has now clearly been proved to be the case, with this very worrying development now with missiles launched from Iran at this airbus base. Also, it seems an attack that may have been launched on an airbase in Iraq as well. And we will just have to see as this unfolds. I think the red line, as far as the US is concerned, clearly would be the loss of life. We have had instances in the past where the US have been targeted by Iran, thinking of the death of Soleimani during the last Trump presidency, when Iran struck back but that was felt by the US as to be a punch that they could deal with, that their missile defence systems were able to take that out. So it depends how successful those air defence systems in Qatar and beyond have been, Martin, with regard to dealing with whatever has come from Iran.
Because, Mark White, we've had this conversation before about Iran wanting to be seen to make a response, to save face in terms of the internal propaganda within their nation. They can project that they're fighting back against the infidel, against America, but will any damage be done to a significant amount that will incur the certain wrath of Donald Trump if key strategic provable damage has been done? We don't know yet, Mark White, if that threshold has been breached.
No, indeed. It depends really what the response is from Iran, just how significant the response is. I should say as well, alarms have been reported at the Ali Al Salam air base in Kuwait, and sirens are also sounding in Bahrain and at the Al Assad air base as well. But is this, again, just really responding to this one incident, or are they being targeted as well? That we don't know. We're at the very early stages of this in terms of trying to assess the potential targets. Certainly the Al Udeid air base in Qatar is one, absolutely.
And we just got some fresh information here coming in from Iran's Tasnim. I'm assuming that's their media outlet, saying that missile operations called the Annunciation of Victory have been launched against US bases in Iraq and Qatar. And the White House and the Department of Defense are aware of and closely monitoring potential threats to the Al Udeid air base in Qatar. Senior White House officials have confirmed there. So, Mark, what we seem to have confirmation there from Iran itself that these missiles launches have been taking place, specifically targeting US bases.
Yes, I mean, it's not a surprise, I have to say, that the Iranians have responded. As I say, it just depends in this sort of tit for tat that we see, and we see it play out, of course, between Iran and Israel on a regular basis. And we saw it actually before the current war that we're now in between Iran and Israel, that kind of tit for tat, where there would be a response from Iran, followed by a response from Israel, a response from Iran, and it was always usually measured where they knew where to draw the line. So it just depends in this instance, as I say, how significant that response is. You know, you would think any missile response, ballistic or otherwise, fired towards US bases would be a red line that the US would not be willing to countenance. It just depends, as I say, in this very, very volatile region where US facilities have over the years been targeted by Iran or its proxies, often its proxies, bases in Iraq and in Syria and beyond that have, you know, during the whole conflict after October 7th, would regularly see those proxies taking a pot shot at US facilities in the region as well. They are very rarely successful and usually dealt with. So the calculation will be made, of course, in the Pentagon, but especially in the White House, as to whether this is a response from Iran that they can deal with, that it has been very quickly and easily dealt with by the missile air defence systems that these bases, and remember countries as well, like Qatar's own sort of defence systems, the UAE, Kuwait, all of their own defence systems will have sprung into action to deal with what they would see as threats over their own particular airspace. So how well that has been dealt with and how significant the threat was is certainly what's going to be factored in any response from the US and potentially its allies going forward, Martin.
And just a bit more information on the size and the strategic importance of this base, the Al Udeid base in Qatar. It is the American military's biggest base in the Middle East, so of course of huge strategic interest in the area, particularly with the conflict raging as it is. And it has the potential, Mark White, to host over 10,000 US troops, as well as over 100 aircraft, strategic bombers and tankers. So the potential to inflict human casualties on the United States is significant. We don't know if anything has got through, but what we do know is that this is an escalating crisis, and the Ayatollah had said at the weekend that he would hold Donald Trump personally responsible for the strategic attacks on those 3 nuclear facilities, and it seems, Mark White, as if this situation is escalating rapidly.
Yes, indeed. You'll just have to forgive me. I know they've put my face up on the screen, but I'm trying to read all of the incoming information from various sources as to what is happening out here, Martin. The statement from Iran says that the operation called Annunciation of Victory was launched against the US bases in Iraq and in Qatar. I don't know, can they take my face off the screen while I'm trying to read all this just now, please?
Yep. And we're hearing also, Mark White, that air raid sirens are now sounding at US bases in Kuwait, in Iraq and Bahrain. Now, that may just be a precautionary measure in some of those nations, or you may find that this is a triple-pronged attack, a situation of heightened panic across the whole area. Mark White, information is coming in quickly. Just to repeat, that is the biggest US naval base in the entire region, with a capacity to host 10,000 US troops, as well as over 100 aircraft, strategic bombers and tankers. So the potential there, Mark White, to inflict huge damage, and something that the White House, we believe, are convening meeting as we speak, as you'd imagine, Mark White, having a crisis meeting about what to do in return, what to do next.
Yes, no, absolutely. They will be meeting in the Situation Room now to try to establish exactly what their response to this should be, Martin. As I say, it's all going to be based on the calculation in terms of how successful their own defences have been in actually trying to take down the systems, the air, the missiles and the like that have been sent over from Iran. And what we're trying to establish as well is whether this...
Yeah.
Sorry, I've been told to wrap.
OK, Mark White, thank you for bringing us up to date. That concludes my input on the Martin Daubney Show. Handing over now to Michelle Jubry. Of course, Jubes and Co is up next, and I'll be back at 7 p.m. The situation in Iran is escalating. Let's hand over now to Michelle Jubry, Jubes and Co.
Martin. Gracious me, ladies and gents, an awful lot has happened since we last spoke on Friday. We thought it might happen. We thought we might have 2 weeks, actually. America was saying that that's what they were going to give Iran. Turns out that was not the case at all. Of course, you'll know by now that we saw those strikes then from America over the weekend. $1 million question was always going to be, what on earth was Iran going to do back in response? The even bigger question, ladies and gents, for every single one of us is, what does all of this mean for us here in the UK? What a mess. And I can tell you right now, it is a very, very fast-moving mess at that. Of course, I am Michelle Jubry. This is Jubes and Co. We are with you until 7 o'clock tonight. There is a lot that we need to get into, and I can tell you alongside me to do just that, I've got Zia Youssef, the chair